from music, where he was a professional musician. So we're happy to have him. It's Ben Potts.
Okay, it's not mandatory that you say anything, but it's highly encouraged. Well,
yeah, my name is Ben. New to the Schertz area. I'm looking forward to serving the community, and I want to thank everybody for the opportunity.
awesome. Thank you so much. Next, from Public Works.
Good evening, Council. Tonight, I got two employees from Public Works for our Water and Wastewater Division. They both started on August 6th of this year. First one I'd like to introduce is Trey Combs. Trey was born and raised in Fort Hood, Texas. He graduated from Lampasas High School in 2014. He moved from Florida a year ago and now lives in St. Hedwig. His hobbies include bull riding, not fighting, sorry, and fishing. My next employee I'd like to introduce is Hector Malden. Hector was born and raised in Medellin, Colombia. He moved to the United States in 2016. He now lives in New Braunfels, Texas, where he graduated from Canyon High School in 2017. His hobbies include playing soccer, ping pong, and tennis.
Wonderful. Okay. Next on the agenda, city events and announcements. Announcements by upcoming city events. Mr. James. Mr. Dudley.
Yes, sir. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. to noon, out here in front of the community center in the parking lot, the Bloodmobile will be out there for a blood drive. If you haven't been watching the news with the holiday and the end of the summer, there's a critical need for blood, so staff and citizens of the city will be able to give blood tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. to noon, or pardon me, 8 a.m. to noon. This Saturday, September 8th, noon to 4 p.m. is the annual Pause in the Pool at the Pickerel Park Pool. So you can bring your four-legged friends out and let them go for a swim with the family. Next Tuesday, September 11th, is our next regularly scheduled City Council meeting, starting at 6 p.m. here in the Council Chambers. Thursday, September 13th, is the Northeast Partnership meeting at 11:30 at the Olympia Hills Golf Course and Conference Center. And then, just as a reminder, next Friday and Saturday, September 14th and 15th, is Schertz Q. It'll be in Pickerel Park. It's our annual barbecue cook-off. There'll be live music, a carnival, a family zone, and of course, fireworks. So be sure to come out for that.
Thank you. Announcement and recognition by Acting City Manager, Mr. James.
None for me.
And no announcements by the Acting City Mayor. Next on the agenda, hearing of residents. Now we ask, when I call your name, please come forwards. Once again, speak directly into the mic so that we can all hear. And please limit our presentations to 3 minutes or so. I can be flexible. First member, or first resident signed up is Ms. Michelle Walmack.
Start, and then you click. Okay. Good evening. My name is Michelle Womack, and I reside at 2944 Mineral Springs in Schertz. Pictures are often worth 1,000 words, so as I speak tonight, I'm showing slides that paint a picture of what conditions were like inside the Schertz Animal Shelter last week. I have also brought packets for council and am requesting that all of my documents and slideshows be added to the official record of this meeting. I was first alerted to concerns back in early June by way of calls and messages about poor treatment of staff, cleanliness, and a claim of animal dumping by the facility manager. I submitted a records request, one that I still have not received. While waiting for records, I let this go. For that, I owe the city of Schertz an apology. My gut told me that there was more, but I waited. As a result, animals within this facility have continued to die and be mistreated, and for that, I am more sorry than you will ever know. A couple of weeks ago, the shelter closed for what they said was illness. I called Ms. Kaiser to inquire about details and was told that a puppy died of unknown causes, and they thought that it was heart-related, but no tests were run to determine the cause of death, largely due to cost and lack of visible symptoms. I asked her if there had been reports of herpes and calicivirus within the facility, which she promised to look into. Again, I waited, but this time I started to listen. Since August 15th, there have been 3 deaths within the facility that I am personally able to confirm. I visited the facility 4 times between August 30th and September 1st. I witnessed filth, unsanitary areas, sick and underweight animals, dogs housed together when they didn't have to be, dogs in cat kennels, and so much more. On Friday, I requested a meeting with city management and 3 council members. I was concerned with conditions, but most importantly, I was determined to make sure that 2 animals in particular lived through the weekend. These animals were Ruby and Mila. Ruby is a stray pit bull who weighs 36 pounds. Have you ever seen a 36-pound pit bull? It's just a bag of bones. Mila is a stray kitten whose sibling had died the day before. I decided that afternoon that there were only 2 choices to make sure that they lived through the weekend: vet care or media. Mr. James would not speak to me in front of council, but he did listen. To be clear, I only wanted council present to the facility to hear my concerns. After lengthy discussion and a little stubbornness on my part, Mr. James agreed to vet care. I want to pause for a moment to thank Mr. James. He made sure that Ruby and Mila were seen by the vet, and he has kept contact with me all weekend long. He was at the facility on Saturday trying to make improvements to current conditions, direct staff, and plan for Ruby and Mila's care. I toured the facility this morning. Ruby and Mila are improving, and the facility is clean like it used to be prior to the current manager's employment with the city. The sick cat population is now in another area where I pray that they receive the care that they need, and for that I thank you. While improvement has been made within the facility, there is still so much work to be done. It is evident that the facility is lacking in proper management and procedure. There is just no other way that it could have been in the condition that it currently is. Saturday, staff was not following vet recommendations for Ruby or for Mila. Without proper facility management procedure and training, the shelter will return to last week's conditions. Animals will suffer and they will die. There are 2 issues that concerned me most over the weekend. First, the facility manager was nowhere to be found while employees scrubbed and scrambled to improve these conditions. A good leader would have been there next to them, scrubbing, taking care of animals, and making the situation right. A strong, properly trained manager takes full responsibility, apologizes to their staff, and digs deep to put in the work. Second, it became abundantly clear that there were no procedures in place to deal with the needs of sick animals on days that the shelter is closed. This is a huge sign of untrained and underqualified leadership. A competent leader is prepared for situations like this and has trained their staff on what to do when things go wrong. Moving forward, there are multiple things that must happen, and they are as follows. A citizen needs to be placed on the Animal Advisory Board. Senior management needs to seek guidance from other local area facilities on proper cleaning and disinfectant policies, as well as policies needed to operate a facility smoothly. We must create a permanent plan for addressing the needs of sick animals when the facility is closed. Staff must be properly trained on the importance of following vet orders. The city must call for an immediate demotion or removal of the facility manager. All cats need to be tested and treated for calicivirus, herpes, upper respiratory infections, and mycoplasma. Reinstate an observation reinstate the observation and new intake side of the facility to avoid introduction of illness to the facility and be able to observe pets for behavioral concerns. Provide training on how to identify animals in need of immediate vet care. Return all vet care to the local area vets instead of pet shots. I have included in your packet a review, some reviews from pet shots that are absolutely horrible about infection happening, particular with spay and neuter, which is what we are using them primarily for. Reestablish positive working relationships with local area rescue organizations that have worked with Schertz for years. We can no longer pick and choose partnerships based on friendships and personal bias. No change to the software program. Money needs to be spent where it needs to be spent, on animal care. Time cards should be reviewed and cross-referenced by someone outside of the facility to make sure everyone's there when they say they're there. Review of all procedural changes needs to occur for any procedural change on or after April 30th of 2018. Stop all transfers. I want to be clear here. Stop all transfers until sick animals are treated. This should be a minimum of 6 months in order to establish standards to allow the staff and management to demonstrate mastery and consistency of expectations. When transfers return, no more San Antonio and Austin transfers. Transfers should be from our smaller sister cities only. They don't have big budgets. They need us. We need to reestablish those relationships, and your packets include information showing San Antonio and Austin's outtake numbers consistently above 90%. So what that means is, for animals that come into the facility, more than 90% leave alive every single month. They're moving them. They're not killing them. All donations to the shelter removed from general funds and placed into a separate account to be used solely for medical needs of facility animals. Full accountability of these funds need to be made public. Immediately stop and reverse any and all decisions made to discontinue or reduce collaboration with Palo Alto. Guys, that's a free program. Why are we getting rid of it? It doesn't make sense. All areas of the building, and with the exception of the medication room and offices, should be open to the public. No more hiding cats behind employee-only doors because they're ill. Most of the cat population today is behind those doors. All areas of, I'm on the same one. Implement a dress code consistent with Schertz standard, specifically referencing the person at the front desk. It's just not a good standard. We need to have a Schertz shirt on, something that represents us as professional in our city building. Before I close, I want to also ask you a couple of questions. There's no need to answer, but these are just food for thought. Why is the staff calling the facility manager the minute I open and enter the building now? If there is nothing wrong with the facility, why has city senior management been scrambling all weekend to get things done? Why did the police department have to take over management of this facility if there was nothing going on? When did numbers, transfers, social media, and moving animals become more important than providing animals in our area, Schertz animals, quality care, and proper medical treatment? In closing, I ask every single one of you to do your due diligence in this matter. While you cannot advise city staff directly, you must demand permanent change and action from Mr. James. This is no longer an issue that we can sweep under the rug and call it political, because it's not going to go away. Animals are suffering and enough lives have been lost. I respectfully request that you demand today that this issue be placed on the agenda and that changes listed above be immediately put into place. This is a heart issue, and we owe it to these pets to give them the care and compassion that they so desperately need and deserve. Numbers don't matter. It doesn't matter how many come in, and it doesn't matter how many come out. It's the lives that matter. How we take care of them matters. So today I beg you to take a stand and demand action. Do right by the citizens of this community and make a difference. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, for hearing of residents, items not on the agenda, shall be limited to statements of specific factual information and given in response to an inquiry. And there were a number of good points that were brought up. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. James to provide some information about what's being done and how we can move forward with this.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, can I have a point of privilege?
Sir.
Instead of doing it tonight, could you actually put this on the agenda and give us a full walkthrough of what's going on at the animal shelter?
I've spoken to Mr. James, and I think that's what he intends.
Is that you going to do that tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Will you include the intake process, the placement process, and the removal of animals there as well?
Yes, sir. We will do that. So I appreciate the comments, and again, I in trying to sort of state fact, and I'll stick with that. We had planned to have the police department do sort of an overview of animal adoption in October, but certainly we will move that up and do that next week. We will also make sure we cover all of the issues listed there. And I will say this as a matter of fact. I think some of the points made are clearly very valid. I think it should not have taken citizens coming in and saying, look at these issues for us to notice them and get on them and deal with it, and that certainly is on us. And you know, other issues I think we want to make sure we spend a bit more time with, but I think certainly some are obvious and straightforward. And so, yeah, we will have that on next week to do a complete overview and cover those points that were brought up tonight.
Thank you. Next person signed up, Mr. Jeff Womack.
Good evening, Jeff Womack, 2944 Mineral Springs. Boy, the fan over there really got my hair, what little bit I got left of it. We originally planned this as just in case Michelle got cut off on her speech. I thank you very much for allowing her to speak up. Unfortunately, I've heard way too much about it, and once again, thank you, Mr. James, for what all you did this weekend. I actually would like to speak on two items real quick, items 8 and 9. Just as a longtime resident of Schertz, I fully believe that one of the councilmen that I've had some interactions with on social media in the last week has some very good points, but I also believe that we have to continue moving forward in the city of Schertz. We need to invest in Schertz. There's so many things that the councilman is right about, and then we diverge into a different path. But I live out in North Schertz with several of the people that I see in the audience. And of course, right now, Wiederstein Road is a big topic between the Cibolo Crossing and the ranch at Wiederstein. But for those of us who live in Belmont and Riata, most of us drive Old Wiederstein, known as Baghdad Highway, on a daily basis. The pavement condition index, and I've spoken to Mr. James about this before, pavement condition index says that it fails in a small section right behind Belmont. Well, from Dean Road to Wiederstein is absolutely deplorable. If you've got anything with a tight suspension on it, do not drive that road. This is the site of Schertz's newest, biggest commercial development. It is the future site, for those of you in the audience that don't know, of SCUC High School number 3. And it is the area that Schertz and Cibolo is developing quite a bit. And we really need to do something about both Wiederstein and Old Wiederstein. I implore you to work with the city across 3009 and get Wiederstein fixed. Both cities need that. Both developments need that. But furthermore, we have got to fix Old Wiederstein as we completely tear up 1103. If y'all haven't driven down 1103 in the last 2 weeks, TxDOT has started removing all of the trees and shrubs and everything, and you can tell change is coming. Well, as y'all know, the traffic's got to go somewhere. And all that traffic on 1103 is now going to be trying to find new outlets, which is Old Wiederstein. Yesterday we had a brush fire, and I'll make this real quick. Yesterday we had a brush fire before all the rains. Old Wiederstein was shut off. Now how do you go? That takes a big chunk out of mobility in North Schertz. So I know we've already looked at it on the future roads plans and stuff like that, but we've really got to make investments in our city for these things. We've got to get those sewer lines in South Schertz and North Schertz. We've got to be able to attract those businesses that Live Oak's going to steal from us. Because the IKEA, everybody's going to want to be right by the IKEA. And that's leaving both Cibolo Crossing and the ranch at Wiederstein in a bad position if the two cities aren't supporting it. Thank you very much.
Next person signed up, Ms. Simmons.
Well, I'm speaking on the Animal Service Center, and I'm sorry.
Can you get to the mic?
Doesn't up? Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what I was saying, just because you wear hearing aids doesn't necessarily mean you can hear everything. So I did not hear quite completely what the lady was saying, though I heard your response. I have an additional response to this that I would like to share with you. And starting again, the reason I really got my attention was on the social media. I was seeing some of these pictures and reading some of the remarks, and I found this very disturbing. Now, because of this, I need to share with you my experience. Can we hear? What?
We can't hear you. Can you get closer to the mic? We can't hear you.
All right, do you want me to start over again? The 3 minutes?
I heard you up to that point.
Okay. Well, anyway, and I thought I wanted to come tonight and share my experience in Animal Service Center, evidently before all these things started. I first was drugged into the center by my son in 2014 because they thought I needed a cat. And I did leave there the next day, the proud owner of a Siamese cat with attitude. But what I want to say is during this whole process, I couldn't have dealt with more supportive people, more encouragement. Clean, the cages were spotless. I was very impressed. So let's fast forward about a year and a half for a couple years, and one day I looked out my window and back window, and there was little balls of fluff running all over my yard. So I thought I had these two little kittens, which I found that a feral cat had decided to move under my porch, and I was the proud owner, shall we say, of 12 baby kittens and a mother cat who was emaciated. Where does family, the animal service, come in? What in the heck do? I go over there. The director sat down with me. We discussed the situation. I left there with supplemental milk for the mother cat and a plan. She followed me home with a cage, showed me how to set it up, trapping all these animals. They worked with me for over a month. Total support, food for the mother, the help for the 12 kittens. Also, one of the things that we talked about was adoption and vet care for all the animals and things. So at this time, I will tell you, I didn't feel like my problem should have to be taken care of by the taxpayers at Schertz. So at that time, there was a back door in which I could donate $500 to cover the expenses. Well, I didn't know this was just the beginning. We got to take care of one litter. The word was out and another cat came, and I ended up with another bunch of cats. And again, the people in the center were fantastic. They were over at my house all the time, picking up the cats, doing everything possible. I was in and out of the center all the time, checking on the kids, you know, and after a while I felt like family. The place was always spotless, the litter pans, the food, the water, everything. And I will have to tell you, when a mother possum showed up with 3 babies, that was the end of it. And I did have a carpenter fix my porch, so I'm no longer, shall we say, fostering feral cats. But what concerns me was the discrepancy between what I experienced just a very few, maybe 2.5 years ago, and what I'm seeing here. Now, I'm proposing an additional solution to what you're doing. I'm a member of the Mayor's Committee of Committees, and I've already coordinated that this animal service is to be placed on our agenda on the 19th, and at which time the staff associated with animal services will be at that meeting and describing and discussing what's going on, the operation of the Animal Service Center. I want to then really, as the lady I do think mentioned, a focus on the veterinary services that are provided and what's going on. I think we need to be, as you have indicated, a fact-finding. Maybe this is, in the military, it's a lower level of starting this fact-finding. And hopefully this is going to give us some insight into what's going on and getting it back to where it was. Now, the other thing I do have is just a suggestion. You do have an Animal Service Advisory Board. You do have a member of that board. I would like to suggest that that advisory board get together and with the council rep and the staff and the concerned citizens and start looking at coordinating and developing a plan. They are very wise, shall we say, in the use of social media. And so maybe through that, when you can devise a plan to reach out to the community and find more volunteers as we move forward with the center. There's a lot of senior citizens out there who want to find something that is meaningful and productive, and perhaps we can make a liaison there. Also, I know it's difficult, but you do have some very wise legal staff. Perhaps you can work out some kind of a fund that people can donate. That is definitely what we would say fenced and will only be used for veterinarian services. And for that purpose, here in front of everybody, if you can figure out how to develop that fund, if I was Warren Buffett, we'd be more, but I will pledge to match dollar for dollar the first $500 that people are able to get for that fund. So we do have a situation here, but I do believe that if we combine the council, the Committee of Committees, the Animal Service Advisory Council, and staff and concerned citizens, that this is something we certainly should be able to resolve and move forward in a very timely fashion. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your efforts, and we need to get back where we were. I agree with that.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Next on the list is Ms. Maggie Titterington.
Good evening, Council. Is that loud enough, Ms. Dennis? All right, fantastic. A couple of heads up and a couple of kudos that I want to extend. I'm going to extend the kudos first to the City of Schertz. First to Kyle and Jennifer and EDC. I know that there was an open house, public public open house for Tri-County roadway improvements. Talks about suggestions from the businesses and everything, and they sent out the notices. Some people came and everything, but some were unable to make it, and so they're actually reaching out personally to some of the businesses in that area. And so between myself and 3009 Self-Storage and Starbucks, who are really concerned about this, we're going to be meeting up on Monday to discuss this, but just really appreciate how hard they're trying to get out there and get the businesses and get their input and find out what they're looking at, what their concerns are. And then also to Mr. James and to Bryce and to Gil Durant and to Lisa Wood, Simmons Real Estate, yeehaw, we're done. He's open, and I don't know if you all have driven past there, but over the holiday weekend, he has on his LED sign thanking the city of Schertz for all the help that they've had. This has been, I believe, Mr. James, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 years in the making, 5 years in the making, but we got him open, we got him here in Schertz, didn't lose him to another city, and he is just happy as can be. And so again, that's thanks to everybody within the city of Schertz, from just the very start with the drainage issues to now final C of O's. We're done. Happy. Thank you so much. The heads up. On the 18th of September, we have our chamber luncheon, and it's going to be on the topic of successful companies develop successful people. And we're having Direct Development come out, their CEO, Craig Krause, and he's going to deliver different points that whether you're a city municipality or you're a business itself, things that everybody does that they make mistakes within their business and things that you can do to correct it. And then 2 days later, he's going to come back and do a business education, our last one of the year, and it's creating your own business solutions. And what this is about, it's kind of a tie-in with the lunch, but it's also about, it's the workshop's designed to make you think deeply and change your methods. So he's going to do it through group discussions. It is free to members to register for that. There's free breakfast. Randolph Brooks is providing that. It'll be at the Civic Center, so if you all want to take part of it, city folk want to do that, any members want to do that, please take advantage. If you're a non-member, it's only $20, and you can register through the chamber. But he's been a very dynamic speaker, and his workshops are really effective. So we're very excited to have our year closed out with him. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next individual, Mr. Brett Bolter.
Brent Bolter, 2633 Cloverbrook Lane. All right, well, we'll see if tonight I can beat my record of last week, getting up and speaking 3 times, since we've got 2 more public hearings. What I wanted to address during hearing the residents, I was here on June 12th during the council meeting when Mr. Hernandez came before you and spoke about his wife, who worked for 10 years at the Animal Services Center. Now, I, like possibly many others that night, went, okay, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Hernandez. I hear what your wife is saying. But potentially, do we have a case of a disgruntled employee who is expressing things because unhappy, left the job, so on and so forth? So we were warned that night by him from an employee who had been working there for 10 years of what was going on and what was going to go on. So now let's move all the way till tonight, and we see Ms. Womack's presentation to show the ramifications of, in my opinion, not taking Mr. Hernandez and his comments seriously that night. Because looking back, we should have. We should have paid attention to what the man had to say. We should have paid attention to what he warned us about, and we didn't. Neither us nor council, I don't think, took what he had to say seriously. So now we move forward, and here we are. And the pictures speak for themselves. I only wanted to echo one more thing that Ms. Womack stated, is simply this. We all know that the buck stops at whoever's in charge. That's where the responsibility is. Mr. Hernandez spoke to the fact that they didn't feel, him and his wife didn't feel that the person that had been appointed to the job was qualified to do the job. We could move forward, and I can't say that his assessment that night was incorrect, because the buck always stops at the leader. So Ms. Womack made her recommendations. I think you need to take those seriously. And again, I just want to echo, on June 12th, we were warned what was going to happen. And here we are in September, and it happened. So shame on all of us for not taking him more seriously that night and getting more engaged. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Number 6 on the list is Ms. Brenda Dennis.
Mayor Pro Tem Scagliello, council members, received an email from a citizen. Her name is Dawn Mitchell, and she asked that I read this for public record tonight. She says she was unable to attend tonight's meeting due to a prior obligation. It says, it has come to her attention through other members of the Schertz community that the care of the facilities of the animals at our animal services location have become less than adequate. My understanding is that the facilities are not being kept adequately sanitary, and many of the pet population within are ill and not adequately cared for. I have seen other citizens' photos and heard experiences, but have not seen for myself. I do know that all the issues regarding management of the facilities, but I would like to know more. She says, I do not know the issues regarding the management of these facilities, but she said she would like to know more information in a more official capacity. Maybe that means inspections, city management eyes, etc. She understands that management of the facility has changed several months ago. She would like to know what conditions are and if they are not what they should have been. Budgetary, she says, to talk about budgetary mismanagement and inadequate staffing. She said, she goes on to say that she has a wonderful dog that she adopted in 2014. The facility was wonderful at that time from her point of view. This is something she wanted me to read into record. That is Miss Dawn Mitchell.
Thank you. Last individual to sign up, Mr. Azus.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I wish I would have chosen different night than this, but tonight is the most appropriate time for me to tell you some things. But what I saw was really disturbing. I wish I never saw that. I'm an animal lover. I thank Ms. Womack and the people that brought this to light. And they did not want to speak about any issues, but I think all of y'all remember that that facility was infested with mold. I have pictures. All of y'all know that. Definitely know that. And really, actually, up to today, it's not fixed. It's not prepared. But that's not what I came up here to say. City Schertz, I remember the city since 1980-81. When I started to travel to the city, I worked for a great man named Earl Mayfield. We built, I helped him build Kitty Hawk, Fields of Dream, off of 2252. He taught me a lot. So I got to know the city of Schertz. The only thing that I could really actually relate to, besides me driving around, is the country kitchen. I was standing up there, and I would go up there before work, and at lunchtime I'd get my Reuben sandwich. I fell in love with the city from back then, and almost 20 years ago, my wife wanted to move to the city of Schertz. And we sold our house when we moved to the city. And I loved it. I truly enjoyed every bit of it. I met a lot of great people. I spent a lot of time in the city. I contributed to a lot of function. And then we decided this coming week we're going to say our goodbyes to the city of Schertz. We are moving to New Braunfels. ETJ, that is. And it just really, every time I travel through the city, it brings a lot of memories. And the only thing I'm asking of y'all, I brought a lot of issues. You get the booze, you get the slap, you get the claps, you get all of that. That never bothers me. I was very truthful to my conviction. I was very truthful to everything I said. I stand by what I said. But here's one thing. When I look at the city council is not united, y'all really need to be united. There's always a lot of issues. You cannot be divided. It's okay. Voice your opinion. Agree to disagree. But your number one priority, as well as my personal number one priority, is to take care of my wife and take care of my businesses. Your number one priority as an elected official is to take care of the resident of the city and the employees of the city. No one should have a special agenda. There's no one better than anyone sitting up here. I never thought when I was sitting on the dais I was better than any of my colleagues. And it's a great council. You all got to see eye to eye. You all got to fix the issues. And it's okay to make somebody's feeling hurt once in a while if you make the right decision. That is okay. It's okay to vote your conscience. Even if you get the booze, even if you get, I'll never vote for you again. That's not what it is all about. It's not because you want to get reelected. Look, it's not a job. It's a public servant. You're a public elected official. You sit up here, and there's some decisions and there's some voices I heard up here, and I'm like, wow, I'm glad, although a lot of people just don't agree, but at least there's some things getting done. I heard Mr. Larson listen to the videos, raising the taxes and all of that. Look, you keep lowering the taxes, you get a clap and you get a vote. But look at your city, what it looks like at the end of the day. JFK said a lot of good things, but the most important one that always stuck in my head, and I'm a taxpayer, I pay a lot of taxes, a lot of money, and I don't mind it. And here's why. Because I remember his words. He says, it's not what your country do for you, it's what you do for your country. It's not what the city do for you, it's what we do for the city. I don't think the taxpayer is going to gripe about paying a few cents if they see that the city is getting better, is getting prettier, is getting cleaner, better roads, better sewer system, better water system. I don't think you're going to have that flock. I think you're going to have people that want to move to the city of Schertz because of those simple reasons and services that they are offered. But I want to thank each and every one of you. Whether I agreed with you at times or disagreed with you at times, I understand when you sit up there, you really have a tough job. You're trying to please everybody, but stop doing that and just do the right thing, and I think the city will move forward. I'm really saddened to move out of the city. I want to thank everybody, whether you agreed with me or disagreed with me, for being here and listening. I want to thank all of those folks up here for saying, that there is some issues, and they told me there's some issues with me and all that. I accepted that. Dr. Kaiser, I'm sorry to see you go. Truly. But thank you. And I wish you the best of luck, Mr. Crawford. And I wish the best of luck to you, Mr. Davis, Mr. Gutierrez, Mr. Larson, of course, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Edward. And I thank you all. And Mr. James, I've always told you I liked you. I just haven't figured out why. Thank you all.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Jesus. Next item on the agenda is consent agenda items. The consent agenda is considered self-explanatory and will be enacted by the council with one motion unless something is pulled. First item, minutes, approval of the August 28, 2018 regular meeting minutes. Item number 2, ordinance number 18M30, an ordinance by the City of Schertz authorizing and amending City Council rules of conduct and procedure, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. Third item, ordinance number 18M31. An ordinance by the City of Schertz, Texas, amending City Council Code of Ethics, amending Section 3, procedures for conducting inquiries, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, and providing an effective date. Item number 4. Item number 4, resolution number 18R108. A resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a contract with Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates for auditing services. Item number 5, resolution number 18R121. A resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acting city manager to reject all proposals received for the 2018 drainage maintenance projects. Request for proposals 2018-0723-1. Item number 6, resolution number 18R122. A resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an amendment to Community Development Block Grant Program Cooperative Agreement with Bexar County, Texas, and other matters in connection therewith. And item number 7, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, to approve a special use permit to allow for operations of a convenience store with gas pumps at 17501 IH 35, Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Items 1 through 7 are on the consent agenda. Does anyone see a need to pull any of these individual items?
Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, I'd like to pull item number 4 and item number 7 for a short discussion.
Councilmember Crawford recommended pulling items number 4 and number 7. Any other items need to be pulled? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve items 1 through 3 and 5 and 6?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Edwards and a second by Councilmember Gutierrez. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. I have 7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Going back to item number 4. Councilmember Crawford, you had questions on this particular item?
Mr. Walters, would you give a short description of the process we're going to go through to select another accounting firm during the next year, please?
Yes, sir. So the audit committee, who is responsible for looking through the proposals of auditing firms and selecting one to recommend to council to engage with, the board unanimously felt that there was a need to change auditing firms. We've been with our current firm for more than 10 years. Due to the timing of the contract start date and how long it takes to go out and request bids, the committee then recommends to stay with the current firm for only 1 year instead of the standard 3 years. And after this audit is complete, the city will go back out and request additional proposals with the intent to change auditing firms. One way to do that, to ensure that happens through our procurement process, is we can actually bar Armstrong, Vaughn & Associates and exclude them specifically from applying again for this next round.
Thank you, Mr. James. Or Walters. Yeah, Walters. Yeah, I'll be okay. Any other questions, Mr. or Councilmember Crawford?
That was fine. Thank you.
Were your concerns addressed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If there's no further questions, do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 18R108?
Second.
I hear a motion by Councilmember Gutierrez and a second by Councilmember Davis. and I already read the caption on this. Any further questions? Call for the vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Have 7 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Moving on to item number 7, consideration and/or action improvement ordinance regarding a request of a special use permit. Once again, Councilmember Crawford, you had concerns with this agenda item.
To the extent that I'd like to ask the staff to work with council in the future, somewhat near future, about looking at our UDC and the procedures and the rules we have for density of use of land, so we don't have 6 gas stations in one basic corner, or 6 restaurants, or 6 whatevers. I'm not trying to change the vote on what's going on tonight, but I think we ought to have a serious discussion about the use of our land for various functions. And that's basically all I wanted to say. So I don't need to, unless anybody else on the council has any questions about the issue.
I do. I want to actually show a couple of pictures since we've had a rain here in the last day or so. I hope you guys don't mind, if you'll indulge me. Can I take the podium? Okay, this is actually this morning, and guys, I'm not saying if you can zoom in on that. This is actually this morning. I went by and I took this picture at around 8:15 this morning. I was driving into the office and I thought I'd run up and take this picture. I want you guys to see what we're looking at. This water on the opposite side of this sign, right over here, that's the driveway that we're talking about. That driveway, water is standing there, and this is almost 1.5 feet of water. Now, I know we can't make them improve the drainage, but we certainly don't want it to get worse. That's one thing. So I have several pictures to show you here. Say here. Again, this is a vehicle that sat there trying to get out. This vehicle was almost up to its running boards in water. And that's another photo. The area I was speaking about having the dumpsters moved to is a little bit to my left, your right on this picture. I think that would be a more appropriate area to have the dumpsters versus having the dumpsters out front. I just want it to be known that I did suggest having the dumpsters moved, and I don't know where we got with that particular issue. When I look at the item, I don't see the dumpsters moved at all, and I understand they got consensus from the council, and if that's what my colleagues want to do, I'll continue to let that go forward. But I do want to ask the actual the builder and designer if they would actually put this into the dumpsters being on the back side.
Thank you for your comments. And we do have a representative here from staff. Can you address those 2 issues? Yeah. No, okay. All right. So 2 issues. One is the standing water, and the other is the dumpster.
I'm sorry. I'll jump in on this one. I'm Karen Mitchell with Mitchell Planning Group.
Okay, you got to get real close to the mic. There you go.
Usually people tell me to be quiet, so this time I'm excited you're saying to speak up. With regard to the drainage situation, we're aware also that there is a drainage problem right there. The fact that we would be redeveloping this site, as I brought up in the last meeting, because TxDOT, we're going to be widening the drive approaches per their requirements, which means that we have to go by what their drainage requirements are. We are not going to make matters worse. We're hoping that matters are going to be made a little bit better over there. or shall I say, quite a bit better whenever we have to put a culvert in right there. But this is all something that TxDOT will require us to do, and it's my understanding that entire area has issues. We will do the best we can with complying. No, that was wrong. We will comply with what TxDOT requires us to do. We'll do the best we can to make it a better situation than what's there right now.
Well, Karen, thank you so much. I've known you for a long time on planning and zoning and everything else.
Right.
I know you're going to do good work. I just don't want it to get worse, because I've seen vehicles actually spin out in that area trying to get out in the traffic. And that was a picture when there was only one car coming. But when that traffic's heavy right there and people are trying to get out of that particular driveway, it is an absolute nightmare. If you sit there long enough, you will have water come into your vehicle, and that is a problem.
And the 7-Eleven person, I'm sorry, I'm tired. I flew in from Colorado this morning, and so I'm still kind of on Rocky Mountain time. He was over there observing it as well, and I don't think we want to make this matter any worse. And legally, we can't. We can't make it any worse.
Okay, I want it to be a point of reference that I did speak about the dumpsters being up front. Guys, I still have my concerns about the dumpsters being on the front of that location. I know people say it can be monitored more so. That is a great thing, that is monitored more so. I personally run a business where I have seen things dumped out in front of, I'm talking very large items on a weekend, typically when people are not looking. So if you have a business that's open 24 hours a day, if you have 2 people on staff, you're going to have I'm not saying you need to have a dumpster monitor. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that I think a better location for that dumpster would be on the back side of that. You have ample room to do so. But if you want to leave it like that and the rest of the council thinks it's okay, I'm thinking about the beauty of this community. We just heard Mr. Azuz come up and say, hey, I drive through and this is what happens. Guys, we just heard Mr. and Mrs. Womack get up and speak about the facilities. Now, I've lived in this community probably, I would say, maybe the second or third longest on council, I would assume. I've been here since 1997. I've seen a tremendous transformation in this community. I've seen some things that we could have done better. Absolutely, we could have done them better. I remember when we were just happy to get something to build in Schertz. I remember when I came to council meetings and we gave away the bank just to get things on council, just to get things into the city. It's not fair to the residents, because I do think you're going to have trash blowing out into the street. We're talking about Highway 35 here. I think you're going to have someone every now and then come up and throw some things behind or in front of your gates. I just want it to be known that I did speak up, and I'm talking about the beauty of this city. I am very serious about that. If you go down in front of Arlen's right now, and if you want me to show you a picture, I'll show you a picture that will absolutely blow your mind. I showed it to a couple of gentlemen the other night, and I can tell you there were dumpsters, there were televisions, there were barbecue pits, there were refrigerators. And the company said, we don't pick those things up. Guys, I want you to develop your property. Don't get me wrong. I do. I think it's a great location. I do. But I also think that there's something that we could perhaps do better. I'm not in the business of telling you what your number should be. Is it a great location? I'm not in the business of doing that. Is it economically feasible, 7-Eleven? Absolutely, it's economically feasible. Is it aesthetically pleasing? Absolutely. Except for a dumpster on the front side of a building. That's the only problem I have with it. I would implore each one of my council members to take a deep look inside. If you own a property and you're trying to keep your tax value up, you're trying to keep the value of that property up, and you have something that comes in and you start seeing dumpsters overflowing and you start seeing things that are being left in front of a dumpster, what are you going to think then? You'll come back in here, you'll complain and say, hey, why are you guys letting them do that? And then I'll hear the old thing of, hey, why don't you hire more code compliance officers? I'll hear that. Guys, why am I saying this? I've been on this dais long enough to know that it happens. It happens. And my job is, if I can curb that or prevent that from happening up front, why not do so? Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell, is there any serious consideration to moving those dumpsters? Is that part of the plan, or could it be?
I'm going to let staff address, oh, okay, never mind, I'm going to address that one then. We had looked at other locations to put the dumpsters. If we put the dumpsters back behind, it's going to pose more of a safety situation for the people that work for 7-Eleven or the patrons at night that have to go out and take the trash out, because it would not be monitored. And that was the reason why we needed it to be in a site visibility, so that if you did have somebody, a 19, 20-year-old that is working at night and they're going to take the trash out, that they're not going back behind in an alley where no one can see them put the trash out, so that it was really more of a safety situation. I can see if there's another reason, is that, but we did look at it. We can look at it again to see if there's another area. But we worked with the city staff. Staff looked at it to see if there was another place we could put the dumpsters as well. So we are very aware that there may be problems with that, as every business has to be concerned with that. And I think that what ends up happening is that it goes on the business owner, meaning that 7-Eleven corporate owns the land. The business itself is owned by a citizen here of the Schertz area. If that sort of thing happens, that they would make sure that that gets cleaned up, because it doesn't look good for the business. If you have stuff sitting out, people aren't going to want to come to your business if you have a lot of stuff that's sitting out in front. So my guess is that they would want to get that stuff out, whether it's the garbage people who come and pick it up, or whether or not they have to hire somebody else to come and get rid of that stuff.
I just wanted to let you guys know my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. You're welcome.
Thank you. One other issue Councilmember Crawford brought up was on the number of gas stations, food service establishments, whatever. My understanding is we don't, as a city council, regulate business plans or business opportunities in the city. That's my answer to Councilmember Crawford. What is staff's answer to Councilmember Crawford?
So what I will say is, typically we don't have the ability to do that when zoning is in place. When we put zoning in place, that's commercial zoning, those uses are allowed by right. In this case, though, to be very clear, the zoning stipulates they need to ask for a specific use permit, and the ordinance lays out sort of the criteria, and council can essentially say yes or no to that. And you can say yes or no to that for whatever reasons you want. We have, in the time I've been here, not considered whether or not we feel there's an over-concentration of a type of use, whether there are too many gas stations, too many fast food restaurants. The general feeling is that let's leave that to the market. If they feel they can compete, let them compete. If other businesses can't because maybe they haven't invested, don't have the service, then that's sort of the free market at work. As Councilman Crawford requested, we can come back and do a work session to talk about that topic. But just to be clear, we have not traditionally, or staff has not gotten the impression council wanted us to look at, do we have too many of a kind of use? How do we make that decision? How do we evaluate it? We did not do that in this case, but again, can come forward with a work session on that in the future.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Dr. Kaiser.
A quick question. So, to Mr. Edwards' point, let's say someone is dumping couches, furniture out there. Who is ultimately responsible for having that removed?
It would be the property owner, 7-Eleven corporate.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have before us ordinance number 18S29, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, simply to approve a special use permit to allow for operation of a convenience store with gas pumps at 17501 IH 35, Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to make a comment, please, sir.
Sir, go ahead.
I take a little bit of exception with what Mr. James says because I spent 6 years on planning and zoning, and there are some people that live behind the Little Caesars over by Green Valley Drive in that area where they wanted to put a gas station, and planning and zoning declined a special use permit for gas pumps. Same thing we're doing right now. Planning and zoning approved it. I brought up the issue of I think we have too many gas stations in one area. 6 in one spot is a little bit high. I don't have a suggestion for what else could be there. And if we choose not to have a restaurant there by other option, that's not my choice to make. That's the developer, the businessman. But I just wanted to say planning and zoning has declined gas stations in the past for the special use permit as a point. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to have just one item put up on the slide for you. Does that speak volumes? I heard someone say a picture is 1,000 words. Nothing against 7-Eleven, nothing against economic development. Love economic development, love free market principle. I'm a capitalist at all forms. Came from nothing. If anybody can do it in America, you can do it. But at the same token, let's be responsible, guys. Let's be responsible. This is a photo that was taken in front of a business. I see mattresses, televisions, 1, 2, 3 couches. God forbid, because I know men that live back there, and I know what they would say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've read the caption. Do I hear a motion one way or another?
A motion to approve ordinance number 18S29.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Larson to approve ordinance number 18S29, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, but I want to let it be known that I am doing it because of economic reasons, but I do believe it needs to be changed. Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
I have 6 ayes and 1 nay from Councilmember Crawford. Motion passed. Moving on to discussion and action items. Item number 8 is a public hearing. But we'll start the public hearing with comments from staff. The caption reads, public hearing on proposal budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. Conduct a public hearing and consideration and or action regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. And this is the second second required public hearing. Okay, Mr. James.
Thank you. Mr. Walters and I will tag team on this one. We will let him cover the technical questions that he's better positioned to answer, and I'll walk us through some policy discussions. Oddly enough, the way the state lays this out, we approve the budget first, and then we approve the tax rate. But fundamentally, your budget is established by your tax rate and your estimate of revenues coming in for the year. So clearly, we would ask that council keep that in mind with regard to your actions so that we try not to find ourselves in a situation whereby we approve a budget, then approve a different tax rate, causing us to have to go back and make adjustments to the budget, which is why James often gives these things together. So, but again, typically when we approve the budget, it's with an understanding of what tax rate would go with that. But what I want to talk about, because I think we had a very good conversation at council last meeting about this, and it really seemed to hinge on where are we really headed as a community and how do we find the appropriate balance. Everyone wants high quality of services. Everyone is concerned about the cost to our residents and our businesses to pay for that. And the challenge is, where do you find that balance in terms of what things you say yes to, what you say no to, and where the tax rate comes in. So if you'll permit me, Just a reminder of the, that the city's budget and tax rate really do serve to further the goals of the city's strategic plan. That's why we have a strategic plan, lays out the vision of our community, and they're important because they frame our identity and brand. Who are we as a city? What sets us apart from other cities? Where are we similar to other cities as we move forward? And really it sets the direction for achieving those objectives. So, when we adopt those things, those are critical, and as staff makes decisions, how do we want to move forward? Just a reminder of some things with regard to Schertz's strategic plan, our vision, community service opportunity, some of the things we value in terms of our policy values, a safe community, high quality of life, economic prosperity, essential services, financially sustainable. So you really have to balance all of those things, because if you want to be financially sustainable, you need to find the appropriate balance of quality of life and essential services. So what we talk about is, what is our true north? What is that direction we are headed as a community, and how does the decision on the budget and the tax rate fit with that? Where's the appropriate balance? When we talk about what we take pride in, and very often, particularly if you started here a number of years ago, you heard about the Money Magazine article where we were ranked in the top 100 best places to live. And if the article were a little more clear, if you read through that, it talks about the things that the community offers. And often it's essential services, quality of life, and cost of living here. When council met in 2009 and 2011 for the strategic plan meetings, talked about our mission. Why do we exist? To be a community where all aspire to live. And that's all. So I think point well taken, is it affordable for all or is it not? What is our vision? Well, our vision is to be a premier city in the region in quality of life and sustainable economic prosperity. So back in 2009 and back in 2011, we set the bar fairly high in terms of where we wanted to get to relative to our peers. Our goals: quality of life, sustainable economic prosperity, effective land use. We just had some conversations about effective land use tonight as we work through those. Regional collaboration and intergovernmental cooperation. Our strengths, and these are just some of them, so certainly you can find others that focus on other things, but note the focus on quality of life, recreational opportunities and quality of life, opportunities, acquisition of additional parkland, indoor soccer, not done that yet. Dog park, we have that. Drainage area for development and recreational activity. In 2018, our strategic plan talks a lot about balancing those core services, quality of life, and economic engine policy values. And again, clearly it talks about balancing those. I think this diagram came about because we didn't want to veer too far to one side or the other. There were conversations about perhaps spending too much on quality of life at one point, needing to focus on core services. And so again, the diagram was intended to find that sweet spot in the middle and not lean too far either way. If you look at our Economic Development Corporation website, it talks about Schertz being a premier community in Texas, or a premier Texas community rather. So we take a lot of pride, the point of these slides, in being a premier community. And I think our quality of life is a lot of what goes to that. Again, recently, San Antonio Magazine in 2017, and talking about top neighborhoods to live, Schertz was listed. Took a lot of pride in that. An example of the parade at 4th of July. Many of you have ridden in that parade. Some of you have, in fact, walked that parade. Some almost not making it back to the vehicle to get to the end. Others having done it before, knowing you got to keep an active pace to keep up with your car. But if you look at it, we talk about our parks, we talk about the events we have, we talk about our assets as a community, we talk about why people want to live here. And certainly I think the key there is when we talk about those essential services, they're those core things you have to have. But do we really want to live in a community that just has essential services? But frankly, we've all seen examples of cities that have overspent and then found themselves unable to sustain that down the road, particularly up to the Northeast. I've told a story working for the city of San Antonio where residents said, we have enough parks that aren't taken care of, we don't need any more. So I think the point's well taken. Be careful what you bite off, Be careful what you add as a facility because you have to maintain it going forward. In terms of the community survey report that we did, what our residents told us, the 3 parks and recreation services that respondents indicated should receive the most emphasis: walking and biking trails. We've got the grant, we've got the city money, we're working on the design of that. Maintenance and appearance of city parks. We've focused some on that, but we've talked a lot about we haven't done it enough. And then the number of city parks. City parks and recreation programs were also the highest priority for the city when ETC Institute, that's the group that did the study, analyzed priority investment ratings for overall city services. And because we value resident input, we've put in the budget another $25,000 to redo the citizen survey to find out what they think. I think some areas we've probably moved forward, some probably we've stepped back. We heard a little bit about that tonight. And some areas we probably haven't made a whole lot of notable progress. So we also talk about why our respondents moved here. And this may be a little bit disappointing because when we talk about everything we've done, we talk about Schertz as a community. The top reason, something none of us control, it's location. And that's given us a lot of things, particularly with economic development, but we can't control it. But 71% of folks, so that's why I moved here. The next reason, though, 60% is quality of life. Next reason, safe community. And then right on the heels, I think fair enough, is it's affordable. So again, indicative of finding the right balance, but I also think indicative of the fact that residents truly do value quality of life facilities. We've done a number of Council on the Go meetings because, frankly, these are not well attended. Council on the Go tend to be our most well-attended meetings that we do, and so the Council has said, let's get out to our residents. Generally better attended. We've often included updates of parks facility because residents have shown an issue, and we've gotten feedback from residents, particularly on quality of life, taxes, things like that. So if you think back to what we heard, what generally were we hearing from our residents in those areas? And again, because we value this in going out and communicating with our residents, we spend about $6,000 a year to videotape those meetings, so there's a cost to that. And we've had comments about the quality not being good, and let's do a better job and make sure we do a good job. We've done our community budget meetings, and I laughed and told somebody I thought a lot about how to phrase this first bullet on there, and this is what I've come up with. So I think I did okay. But perhaps I'll hear from folks that I did not do okay. Although not well attended, these meetings provide a forum for those residents who are highly engaged to discuss the budget and offer their views. And I think we think there's a lot of value in that. For those folks who take the time, as many of the folks here are, to show up at these meetings and show up at these, we really ought to have a conversation, really walk them through. And what percentage of the attendees generally supported the proposed tax increase versus not increasing taxes? So again, given the staff time and the cost, do we want to continue to solicit our input from our residents? And how do we factor that input that we heard in the decision we make with regard to the budget? So I think I'm going the right way. So at the last meeting, I think we heard some good comments about, hey, in lieu of raising taxes, we can make some cuts to some things, and these are tough choices. Nobody wants to, but frankly, that's what that balance is about. So shred days, outdoor pools, stop the free lunch for non-Schertz residents, going digital with Schertz Magazine, reduce the number of parks, stop adding new parks. So just a couple of things. We've proposed kind of 2 shred days per year. Just as some of you noticed in the Schertz Magazine, we have listed that the first shred day is coming up next month in the new fiscal year. If Council doesn't approve the budget, likely we wouldn't cancel it. We'll find the money out of contingency, do it, and then not do another one, but wanted to make clear. But keep in mind, we collected over 9,000 gallons of paper to be shredded at the events this past year. It was a big turnout. We seemed like we nearly killed a couple staff people and council people. We had traffic backed up in Schertz Parkway, got a very good turnout for it. While some residents may own a shredder, others clearly do not, given that we had some people show up with a few pieces of paper and it looked like others had 30 years of paper that they came and wanted us to shred for them. So we could reduce the level of service. So before we say just cut entirely, we could drop it to 1 a year and cut the cost. But perhaps we should consider this as part of that larger discussion of solid waste. Number of times trash is picked up a week. cutting some costs there. Increased emphasis on recycling that we've heard about and asked for presentations on. Allowing businesses to select their own trash service rather than offset the cost of residential service through mandating a commercial vendor. And then brush chipping. Again, probably a more cost-effective way to do that. It eats up time of our public works folks who are supposed to be working on streets and water lines and sewer lines and drainage, and they're out chipping brush, which is a fairly dangerous job. So again, not to say that we shouldn't look at this, but maybe we need to have a bigger conversation about it before we jump to the right conclusion. Same thing for some of these things. Closing the pool, saving $150,000 a year. Keep in mind, for the 62 days both were open, we had over 12,000 folks. Now, to be clear, Windy Swan had the far fewest. About 20% of that or so attended Windy Swan, so it's much less utilized. But would the residents of that area prefer the pool to be closed or the community center? You don't get quite the savings, but they may say, well, let's add something else to that. Let's add something, well, let's keep the pool. So if we haven't really had those conversations with our residents, are we confident in what we need to cut? You know, once we close it, can we go back on it? Once we close it for a year, we quit doing maintenance on it, it doesn't have water in it, can we undo that decision if we change our mind? So we just need to be thoughtful. Comments about splash pads. Well, we called Universal City, our friends over there, and it said, hey, how much does it cost you? What are you budgeting? What I got, and to quote them, was small in all caps, which was a bit ironic. But they said the one being built now has UC staff doing the grading, trenching, et cetera, so they've used their own staff to reduce cost. It's costing about $600,000. They've got about another $25,000 put in for fencing and shade structures and about $25,000 to maintenance operation. Now that's a whole lot less $25,000 a year than the $150,000, but you're making a big investment. But they were quick to go on and say, but keep in mind, we are planning a larger one in UC Park for $1.5 million. So again, I think the suggestion that we need to look at other alternatives is valid, and that is ultimately what staff is proposing. What we're simply saying is, let's make sure we've thought this stuff through fully before we jump to some of those. You know, with regard to the free lunches for non-Schertz residents, we've applied for some grant funding. Generally, the city of Cibolo has said they're willing to kick in about $40,000 a year for that cost. We can continue to look to ways to drive revenue and donations while maintaining the level of service. Keep in mind that those folks not Cibolo residents, it's about 21%, so maybe 20 meals a day. Generally, they're smaller cities with just a few folks, or they're cities that already have a senior center that are likely not to contribute. And again, you know, we can evaluate that, but just so we talk order of magnitude at this point, if Cibolo were to contribute, that's the case. Schertz Magazine, we've talked a lot about, you know, the going digital, maybe save $115,000, maybe more, because it may involve some staff costs with that. You know, but currently we print $180,000 a year. This year, in fact, ironically, we were looking to up that to $192,000. Digital reads are growing, 342 to 461 from 2016 to 2018. The average time spent jumped from 2 minutes 43 seconds to 3 minutes 20 seconds. I'm not sure 3 minutes 20 seconds is really a full review that we get with the paper version, though it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell how many are tossed in the trash right away. You know, keep in mind with the Digital Perks Guide, that had 1,760 views, so it had a higher number of views. We actually do a bi-weekly newsletter, so to be clear, we do a digital version of our magazine now, so to keep the numbers in mind. We also do a bi-weekly e-newsletter. It goes out to over 8,000 people. We get a bounce rate of about 11%, and then about an open rate of 19%. So we send out a lot, don't have a whole lot opened going forward. About 700 copies of the magazine are distributed to folks around town for people to pick up. Staff keeps about an extra 50 or 100 of those. And I will say that with the August magazine, with the Girl Scout on the cover, we don't have any more copies of the magazine. It was a real popular one. We get a nice cover, we get a good topic, they go. Here's an example where we've had a lot of people pick up that magazine. But certainly understand, it is a costly document, and decisions we've made to have it mostly be content, really have ads to support our local businesses who are trying to target our residents, and have it be cost effective. You know, it means we pay for the magazine. You know, while digital is growing, keep in mind, going back to the citizen survey, 83% of respondents, the highest, said the magazine was their primary source of information. So until we survey again, and we may get different results, and I think staff says we think we're moving more digital, but until we redo that survey, see how the numbers have shifted, do we want to make that change yet? The other thing is, interestingly enough, that may have got missed because it didn't make the cut, but staff had proposed adding money for video content, which we've seen to be very popular. You know, we did the Hawk crosswalk video, over 1,000 views on YouTube, 17,000 on Facebook. We just did a new one on safety guard crossing, the issues we've had with people cutting, and I'll look to Linda. How many have we had views? I can't hear you. 1,400. And when did that go up? So about 1,100 views on a video that we put up this morning. So again, I think staff's agreeable. Digital seems to be the way we're going, but we haven't talked a lot about how do we use video, which we tend to get fairly high results from, but there's a cost to put on. You know, we talked about reducing the number of parks. You know, again, there's a process legally you have to go through to get rid of parks, putting it on the ballot, see if you want to get rid of it. You know, the assumption being that our per capita is high, but I'd make sure we're doing an apples to apples comparison. You know, I think the figure that got us our $68 per person included the Civic Center, Event Center, and Senior Center parking lot redo, as well as our pools and parks and capital equipment used by some other departments. We're replacing the bucket truck. It's not just parks that uses that. So keep in mind, you know, the way budgets are all laid out can really be confusing, and you really have to delve into it. You know, again, the data can be confusing. In checking New Braunfels' annual report, it looked to me like they were saying they had 39 parks, not 18. They seem to emphasize in their parks master plan acreage of parks, not number of parks, though, and I think about 551 acres worth of parks. So what's the standard we actually want to use to measure going forward? You know, there was talk about focusing on revenue, and I think that's something that we've said we're going to come back with. Keep in mind, though, that other cities have some things like New Braunfels that may allow them to do greater cost recovery. Some of you may have been to the tube shoot. Perhaps you may have had the misfortune to choose to go this day where you're not really shooting. You're basically packed in like sardines, but you keep in mind, they charge to go to that, they charge for parking, they've also got miniature golf, miniature train ride, and paddle boats, do birthday parties, so let's make sure we're doing an apples to apples, but I think staff has heard council say, let's revisit those partnerships, find out where they're cost effective, find out where our residents are getting the most benefit, and we're agreeable to do that. Our point is simply, let's not jump too quickly. You know, stop adding new parks. We hear from residents now near Aurora Heights, near Kensington Ranch, about how a park near them might be built. So we hear people who don't have a park near them saying, when am I going to get a park? We've had to have some tough conversations with Kensington Ranch and say, frankly, you'll get probably a trail along Dietz Creek, but there really isn't land to build a park near you. But, you know, the plan is to add more down south, add more up north where we can. And so one thing to keep in mind is, are we really comfortable with different levels of service in different parts of the community? We've heard that a bit already, that a lot of our stuff is located in the central part of the city as opposed to northern and southern. And so where is the right balance? So staff is not saying we don't need to look at these things. What we are in fact saying is that we need to spend a lot of time looking at these things over the course of the next year to ensure we are making an informed decision that we understand the consequences of, as opposed to making it now and not really being realized what the implications will be. And I'm getting close. Again, be careful on things that may seem minor, have a big implication. What we seem to agree on is that maintenance levels are not where they need to be and funding's an issue. Increases in the veterans' homestead exemptions and court revenue have significantly impacted the city, almost $2.5 million. So again, we talk about living with our means. When our means drop, again, need to live within it, but we've had these things that have depressed our revenue. Though to be clear, our revenue's grown every year. We have to look for efficiencies. You saw that in some of the things with the budget. And then we need to break that cycle we're in. The air conditioning we've got. We need to find cost-effective solutions over the long term, not relying on CO bonds, and look at things that we can do that save us money in the long run. So again, staff is recommending we do this analysis over the course of the next year. Some of the things I think we've talked about, it's probably coming up in a minute, but from staff's perspective, we think there are a couple of options. One is we can adjust our budget assumption. The comment has been made that we are often pessimistic or conservative, whichever term one feels more comfortable with our revenue estimates and our expenditures. And generally, we come in with more revenue and fewer expenditures, but that's by design. Keep in mind that doesn't generate new money. Anything that we have at the end of one year is essentially rolled into the next year, which is why we try to limit mid-year budget adjustments so we can consider all of the opportunity costs, and so that money gets rolled into the next year, and essentially we just spend it a little bit later. But that's to ensure we don't have a problem, because it is very problematic to come up short on revenue or higher expenses, and we often have to make a cut mid-year, and our choices are limited then. And so we're not making the wisest choices because we have limited options. And keep in mind, despite our pessimistic conservative estimating, our sales tax has declined 3 times in the past 10 years. Now, our revenue's always gone up. I want to repeat that. Our revenue's always gone up. But our numbers can drop or not be as high as we think. So we have to be very cautious with assuming things. So our permit revenue this past year was great. So we had 3 schools come in. Don't think we're going to have that this next year. It's a bit hit or miss, so we're always conservative. But again, that money gets rolled to the following year. Often our spending shortfalls are programs that run behind schedule, and often it's also because we have high staff turnover. Well, we've talked about how do we need to reduce staff turnover. Well, certainly pay is a factor. We've talked about doing the classification compensation study. We've talked about the workload of our staff. Some areas it's probably high, some areas it's probably a bit low, and we need to also look at a manpower study with it. But if we are successful in that, then that spending that's lower, the goal is to not have that happen. And then keep in mind, we don't want to be a city we read about. I think it was city of Texarkana last year, a year ago. Their sales tax didn't come in what they expected. They drew down from the water fund as a loan, and they have to pay it back. So it's problematic to find yourself in that situation. Again, main thing is the money rolls over to the next year. Option 2 is essentially we can quickly make some cuts in programs. We can increase the funding for maintenance and maintain the current tax rate. But again, cuts this significant cannot be made without impacting service levels. And this significant of cuts, we need to really look at if we're going to do that, is our strategic plan still valid? Do we still valid those things, or do we need to push up our tax rate as a higher priority? And so again, we've talked about competitive pay and benefit and staffing levels appropriate to meet expectation. We haven't factored that in yet. So from a staff perspective, we can make cuts to do more with maintenance, but there isn't money proposed then to be able to, if we do the class and comp, to do anything about it. And so if we want the flexibility to deal with what comes at us or deal with some of the core issues, that's a fundamental issue. Option 3, and this is staff's recommendation, is approve the proposed tax increase to immediately fund the increased maintenance and the expanded programs desired, because we tried to pick ones that increase our effectiveness, gain some efficiencies, and then over the course of the next year, really spend that time looking at those programs. So again, decide if in light of the long and short term they're appropriate. We can actively and aggressively solicit input from the members of the community. So when we put something and say, how do you really feel about this program, we can then tell them, well, this is what it costs you, because that may change their mind, and then have them say, this is what I'd like. We can use the citizen survey, council on the go meetings. We can identify other levels of other areas like maintenance with service areas are below the desired level. So we talked about, we have a number of areas where we are not really keeping up the way we needed to, and so be careful that somehow with a one-time cut of programs we're gonna be where we need to be. And then again, if we go through this exercise over the course of the next year, and at that point we say, we really have found the cuts, we found the efficiencies, we can drop the tax rate back down. Some examples of programs: Senior Center program and costs, Parks Master Plan standards, how many parks we want, ACOG Art Bus Program, that's continued to increase, Schertz Magazine, Recreation Partnerships, the Civic Center we've talked a lot about as well, and again, our trash collection, just to name a few. So the idea is let's really dig into this stuff, really let our residents tell us what they think. Option 4 is you can approve the budget at either the current or the effective tax rate, and we showed those list of cut programs, and you fund the programs at those levels. Again, when we go to the current tax rate, we add additional monies for maintenance. So we can do that, and we fund those things, and we move forward. So there's a way to go with the different tax rate, cut the things that didn't make it, and then over the course of the next year, we can evaluate those programs to determine what we want to, for the future, not fund. But staff is recommending option 3, and it's fundamentally because we think we've set a vision for the community that the community, based on the input we hear, values. We think the area, we are so far behind that we're not going to cut our way out of it, frankly. Again, we haven't funded class and comp. We haven't funded a staffing study. We often have new programs that we want to tack on. But we do think we need to look long and hard over the next year to make some of those cuts. And likely, I think, frankly, we're going to find other things that are a more effective use of those monies that we're not doing now. So I think those cuts that we make, we're going to say, you know, this is where we can use it on something we're not doing today and get more bang for our buck. So we're not going to find a bunch of extra money. We're going to shift to what is a higher priority now going forward. So staff is recommending option 3, but with that, I'll stop talking.
Thank you, sir. That was comprehensive there. And Mr. Walters, do you have a speaking part in this? No. Does staff have anything else to present? Okay. Well, this is open for public hearing. So it's 7:44, and I will open it up for a public hearing. If residents have anything to say about adopting of the budget for this fiscal year. And if you come forward, please state your name and, okay.
Back yet again. Brent Bolter, 2633 Cloverbrook Lane. So you've already heard me speak to the fact that I support the tax increase. I spoke at the public hearing last week, I spoke at the budget meeting, and said the same thing. Giving Mr. Larson due deference to his presentation and acknowledging some of the truths that are in there. But again, I support raising the tax rate for all the reasons that have been outlined as to why it's a good reason. I saw in Mr. James' presentation tonight some things that I think were positive and speak to what I was going to come tonight and speak to. I don't think in the past that it's been a normal part of the budget planning process to look at potential things that don't need to be in the budget anymore. I think, and this is true, especially true at the federal government, what happens is, here's all the list of things that we do and we pay for. This is all the things that we did last year. So what happens in the next year is, here's all the things that we want to keep doing, okay? And then it's a question of, are we going to give anything more money, or are we just going to keep it to the level of what we did last year? And then what else are we going to add that maybe we don't have in the budget? So that's generally the way things have been done. What I would like to see is, as part of the normal budget process, not only do you take a look at, okay, what are we going to keep, what the levels of funding are going to stay the same, but potentially what's now outlived its usefulness, what needs to not be in the budget anymore. You don't keep it in there just because, well, we've had it in there for the last 9 years. And again, to Mr. James' point, yeah, allow staff to take a look at it. You know, go out there and get comments. You know, council on the go, bring it up. Hey, you know, here's what we're looking at. What's your guys' input? I just think that it's not been part of the process. So going forward, I think that should be a normal part of the process. Not only just looking at, here's how much money we're going to get, here's what the tax rate should be, here's all the items that we've had in the budget, how much are we going to add, what are we going to add additionally that we didn't have in the budget, but taking a hard look at everything in the budget and going, what makes sense to keep, what makes sense to, okay, we spent $5,000 on this year before, This year, we're going to spend $2,500, you know, for whatever the reasons may be, because we can gain efficiencies and everything else. I just think it hasn't been part of the normal process. I think that's the part that's been missing. So what's happened in this current one is we've spoken of things and brought up, but it's like we're trying to do it in a rush because it hasn't been part of the normal process. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, in 2 weeks you got to decide whether we're cutting the magazine or keeping the magazine. It's not what I'm advocating. Let's make a normal part of the process going into the budget planning going forward, that you take a look at those things and you have time to study them and then decide, okay, this is what we're going to do here, versus 2 weeks and do we cut, do we keep, whatever, because that's not enough time to allow everybody to, you know, get a kick in. We keep it, we don't keep it, whatever. So that's the only thing going forward that I think, and again, I give Mr. James credit that he spoke to some of those things tonight, and I think that was a positive development. But I think that's what's been missing. So with that, I'll sign off and not break my 3-time speaking last week record tonight and just leave it to twice tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
You got to get your normal crew of Belmont Park up here, you know. It wouldn't be nice, it wouldn't be right if we weren't here. Mr. James came up and presented quite a bit of stuff that we had talked about over to some of the open meetings and last week. He did a good job of covering a lot of that information. Last week, Mr. Larson talked about our needs and our wants. Sometimes it's real hard to not give us our wants. But you guys have been voted in to your positions, and you're kind of in a tough spot because you need to concentrate on the needs of the city. 2 specific ones hit me tonight, listening about the animal shelter. That's a need that the city needs to look at as to what's going on and take care of it. The other one is we're all sitting here hot. That's a need for the city to start maintaining some of their facilities. It's not a want, it's a need, okay? Those are things that need to be looked at by you as a council for what the city needs. You know, there's lots of things that the citizens would like to have, want to have. I grew up having my needs met. My parents met my needs. I didn't realize that I was missing so much by not having everything I am told now that I wanted. I had my needs met. That's what needs to happen. Once you do that, things can start to go on from there. So you need to look very carefully at that. The city, and he did a good job tonight. He presented quite a bit of stuff. But you need to look at the needs of the city versus all the wants of the city.
Sir, before you leave, name and address for the record.
Dana Eldridge, 2628 Gallant Fox Drive, Belmont Park.
Thank you, sir. You're back.
Hi. Michelle Womack, 2944 Mineral Springs. I just have a couple of really quick things. First of all, I do support the increase in taxes. I think that we have a lot to do here, and we can't realistically do it without that increase. I think we can do it responsibly, and I think most of our residents, at least the residents that I talk to, are okay with this. Nobody wants to pay extra tax, but sometimes it's needed. And I think that's where we are right now. In respect to the Windy Swan pool, I would ask that before you make any decisions about closing the Windy Swan pool, that you read the original deed. When that deed was signed with our city, it was signed specifically because we agreed that that land would continue to be used as a public swimming pool. That's what we agreed to when we took it. So we can't just say, oh, by the way, now we've changed our mind, we want to save some money and we're going to fill it in, because that's what the residents expected from us when we signed it. It's illegal. It's in there. The verbiage is in there. So if you know, before you make a decision on that specific item, I ask every one of you to pull the deed. If you don't have it, I do. And just look at the wording and ask yourself, are you willing to go back on the promise you made to that community? Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Welcome.
I'll be good this time. Frondo Hayward, 2628 Hansel Heights. I went to the workshop, right name, workshop. I went to all the budget meetings. I've sat in all the city council budget meetings, and I just want to commend Mr. James and the staff for the work that they've done with looking at the budget. Background, I did fuel budgets, my last gig in the Navy for 3rd Fleet. It sucks when halfway through the year, you get told that about $225 million gets cut from the budget, and all those skippers who are your friends, you have to tell them, I got nothing for you, I'll buy you a beer at the club later, because it is what it is, and you're not high in the party, and you're not getting any fuel for a while. You get enough to go out maybe once or twice a month. Everything else is in the trainer, but these guys are the next to go down, sailing away. So I really appreciate them looking in advance and continuing to look to make sure that we figure out what's needed, where we can refine things at, and what we can use to go forward in the future. I don't like paying more in taxes, flat out. But the reality is, sometimes I may have to. Been pounding the pavement here recently, and lots of people have echoed different things of what they're not happy about. And some of them are roads. You need money for the roads. We know roads need to be fixed. I don't know how we get there. This isn't the farm. We got farmland in East Texas, but most people who move to the city are looking for paved roads. And as council, you guys have a hard thing, because there's a certain expectation for even the council. There's an expectation for the city staff to meet those. If we're asking you to do some things, we've got to be willing to fund the things that we're asking you to do. So I really appreciate if y'all, as mentioned, do that survey to figure out, okay, citizens, you want this is what it's going to cost. Now, give us feedback. I really wish more people came out to all these budget meetings so you could have face-to-face feedback to make your decision a little easier with that direct thing. It is what it is, and I know there's going to be public hearings, so hopefully you'll get some more feedback from public hearings. So I'm going to say I don't like taxes, but I know that they're necessary, and I commend them on the job that they've done and the fact that they're going to continue to look to see where they can be cost-effective when taxes go up.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. John Sullivan, 513 Triple Crown. I just want to echo the appreciation for the way the budget was done this year. I thought it was, increased transparency, more material, seeing the list of, what was asked for by staff and what could be funded, and even the list of what couldn't be funded was really enlightening. And I just thought that was increased transparency and a really well done job by the staff. And with that, what they came forward with, increasing the tax rate, I know, maybe we shouldn't have been lowering it in recent years. So I really think that we really need to go with that. So increase the tax rate, and especially with the budget in particular, increasing maintenance funding towards those three big items, the facilities, the parks, and the roads. Since I've been involved with the city, I've noticed those three items, most of all, are where I see deficiencies and where I hear complaints from everyone I talk to in our city and people who haven't moved to our city and in other cities. So to that regard, thank you, and I hope we can move forward with the request as presented by staff.
Thank you. Anybody else? There be nobody else. 7:58. We'll close the public hearing. Now, item number 8, ordinance number 18T32, consideration and/or action approving an ordinance on a proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. Mr. James.
I apologize, Councilman. If I may, though, I intended to mention this just in the interest of, again, transparency and letting you know. One of the things that we do every year is we talk about our water and sewer rates. You may remember that we've briefed you, and as you will see up here, the rate structure we've had for typical 5/8 meter, 5,000 gallons of water and wastewater, this is what we had shown in terms of the increase going forward, 70.56 to 75.14. That's to come forward in the future, but in light of, I think, a valid point, all this stuff adds up and it stacks. I didn't want to have this presentation and not remind you of this fact. I will tell you, though, that staff isn't going to be recommending what we have shown you previously. Every year we redo the study, we evaluate that. They say, what are our expenses, what do we need, how is our use, what are water costs doing? And so positively, to a degree, we are not going to be recommending that it go up as much. We are still recommending an increase. That's about $3.50 more a month, but it's less than what had been. But I just didn't want to have this budget presentation with staff having received the report late last week and not mention it in deference to transparency and that public trust. Wanted to kind of remind folks that there is an increase there too, it stacks, but that lets you know that when we come present, we think we can, the consultant has two options and we don't need to go up as much on that. And that still allows us to be sustainable and look forward to the future. So I apologize.
Is that all we have from staff?
Oh, yeah, from staff, yes.
Okay. Let me read this ordinance number 18T32. It's an ordinance adopting a budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018, and ending September 30th, 2018, in accordance with the Charter of the City of Schertz, Texas, providing for the filing of the budget, providing that this ordinance shall be cumulative of all ordinances, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. That having been said, I'll open it up for discussion by the council. Councilmember Edwards.
Several things. Mr. James, we recently had a discussion about Wiederstein Road. I know Mr. Womack was talking about the cost of Wiederstein Road, or what they call the Baghdad Highway. Reality, we had talked about this mile or so stretch, and that number that we received was somewhere close to what, 25 to 40 million, depending on what we did.
Let me see what Kyle can remind me of. Just the stretch, the mile or so, you would come up not 4 to 6 million for that.
Are you talking from 35? Are you talking from 35 to the corner? Or are you talking the backside?
35 to the corner.
Okay, but we're talking. I think he's talking about the backside up to Dean Road.
Backside, I think, was somewhere in the order of magnitude of all the way to 1103. You remember? It's about 11 million or something, wasn't it? I think. What was our estimate on that? Yeah, Kyle's going to pull it up. Let him pull it up, we'll give you that.
So I want the citizens to know what that number is, because we looked at this all together, combined, and it was a huge number, if you guys all remember that. So I wanted to just have that for public record. Second thing, how many workshops do we have, budget workshops? You remember?
With council, we had 2 budget workshops outside of council session. We had the early one back in February-ish where we kind of talked about need, and then we had the subsequent one a couple months.
How many for the public?
We had 3 of them for the public.
What was the attendance of the public budget workshops? Ms. Hayward, you were there.
Yeah, you guys were there. We had, I don't know, between four and maybe 10 or 12, maybe the 4 to 8.
Edwards.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Max.
Mr. Edwards, we probably had 20 different people in 3 of those meetings.
Yeah,
Combined.
Not
20
counting
total.
staff and regular folks that,
Fair point, yes, sir.
yeah, very,
I just want that to be recognized because we received these emails. I'm quite sure everyone received the email I received today saying, we're watching you, and if you raise those taxes. Just reality. And that went to everyone, by the way. So if we talk about the magazine streamlining, you know, my question about that magazine was simply this. And to Mr. Larson's point, I was saying that we have multiple contracts for printing.
Yes, sir.
I was saying give that one company an opportunity to streamline that process. And I know they have to do a different font, a different layout. But if they want a shot at that, I think that would be more conducive and more efficient. That's what I was saying about the magazine. And I'm going to go down the list. You can answer if you want. One-time purchases. We talked about a machine at the budget workshop. We talked about a machine that they needed in maintenance. The machine was a machine part washer.
Yes, sir.
One-time purchase that can save us money with efficiency. A properly trained staff, one-time purchase. Next thing. Shipping services. Now, at one time, Bear Waste did all these things for free, clean up and all those things. Remember that? We went to a new service contractor with Republic, right?
We did that. I'll let Dudley speak to it. I think when we went to that, the service is always cost. We've always had staff do it. There's been some maybe lack of clear, or I'm not sure practice was always consistent with the contract. Is that accurate, Dudley?
That is correct. Prior to 2015, Bear Waste would do bulk pickup of brush and other things, couches, refrigerators, etc., and they would work out the rate for that with the citizen directly, and the city was not in that picture. In the 2015 ordinance that was passed, while Bear Waste was still our provider, the city made sure they were inserted in that process, and we also gave our citizens 12 pickups a year of bulk waste at no charge. Then shortly after that, Bear Waste sold their organization to Republic, and Republic continues to be bound by that ordinance. So the first 12 pickups in a 12-month period by our current ordinance are at no cost to the citizen. We still pay Republic Services now for that pickup, but that's why the city's inserted in that, so we make sure what's getting picked up is what we're getting charged for.
Thank you. Do you remember when the young man that owns Chalker Tree Services came and said, I will provide those services and equipment for free?
I do, yes, sir.
If you put it down by Pecan Dry, he'll provide the services. A business owner that lives on Maskey Road said, I'll do it for free. But I think there were some caveats to it. He was saying also that he wanted to be able to chip some of his product. Am I not correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's something that we always talk about, public-private partnerships. That's a great public-private partnership. There's nothing wrong with that. We did it with the YMCA. Are there some insurance issues? I don't know, but I think it's something that we need to explore. I don't think we just shut it out. So that's another thing that we could streamline.
If I may, Councilman, that figure is 12 to 16 million that we got for the section of Wiederstein.
So 12 to 16 million for Wiederstein. Okay. Next thing, no frills budget. Man, I like the fact that we have no frills. Brian, you know me. I'm a kind of just, hey, call it what it is. If you have to tell me no, tell me no. If I'm out of line, tell me I'm out of line.
I will.
But you guys have done a heck of a job here with the budget. You really have. I think that it would be almost impossible not to pass this budget as we see it. Okay, I know there's been some emphasis on the shredding. You know, if we're talking about 9,000, 6 pounds, we think about the 9,000 buckets that were received of waste. Is that a shredded bucket or is that like compacted bucket?
Big toter. And we threw it all into the toter.
Oh, that's the big toter. Okay.
That was the volume of that.
Okay, so go back to what we said about people picking location, quality of life, safety, and then affordability. So quality of life was 71%. Location was 71%. Quality of life was 60%. Safety was 56%. and affordability was 47%, right? Now, that being the case, I think people are already speaking through the surveys of what they want. If people are speaking through the surveys of what they want, I suggest highly doing a manpower study versus just doing a class and comp study.
So we have heard that from council, and so I think from a staff perspective, if council were to approve the budget with the tax rate increase, and you heard my comments at the work session and due deference to council, then yeah, I think staff would be supportive at that point of doing, with the class and comp, doing the manpower study, because frankly, with the increase in future years, we have the ability to do something with that data. So where we see we're short, we have resources we can put to it to get the level of service, and where we're high, we will shift the resources. As I've said, with this budget, we are shifting someone out of courts, except on court days, and they'll work in building permit and utility billing, because we think with that number dropping, we need to do that. So it works both ways, and we'll do that. So again, if this were, we'd throw it probably from the contingency fund to do that on this as well.
So with that being said, last item. Today I received my copy of the Schertz magazine. And if you haven't seen it, it's a picture of a beautiful young lady by the name of, I want to say Gordon maybe, or Gordon, she's a ballerina. Well done. Well done. It's been well done for a long time. I still think that if we can streamline the process and maybe pick up some other printing services for that contractor, that may be something to consider seriously. Yes. Why not have a one-stop shop for all of our printing services and not have pieces out everywhere? That streamlines efficiency, guys.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Crawford.
Just a question, Mr. James. Since the animal shelter is now under the police department,
yes, sir,
has their budget been increased to handle the need for what's going to change in the next couple of weeks or a month or whatever?
So let me be clear. The animal care services budget will be moved over under police.
But will there be a need for any increase in their budget for what's going on and what needs to be going on?
So let me say this, maybe to Ms. Womack's point earlier. Fundamentally, the issues with regard to the cleanliness and the cleaning doesn't have to do with budget. That didn't happen because we were short on money. I want to be very clear on that. In deference to her comment for the time she took going in, if the budget approved, you may recall we have the software system that's proposed. I'm telling you, we will not make that purchase until we have time to work through these issues with the Community and Animal Care Services Board. And if the recommendation out of that board is we think those funds need to be put elsewhere, then I'll come back and make that budget adjustment to you. We won't spend that money October 1st. We'll find a way to get there. We'll make sure we get there. We'll talk about the efficiencies we get with that and other things going forward. So I will tell you this, that we are already in process of making some shifts. Some of those may have some cost to it. I don't want to say that what's happened is a cost issue, but certainly as we work through this year, we may be putting additional resources into some areas to gain some efficiencies and focuses, but it's not fundamentally, overwhelmingly a money issue.
Okay.
I think by some partnerships and doing some things, we can get there.
One other question real quick. Now, I'll come back to it in a minute. That's okay.
Okay, and to be clear, it was 9,000 gallons. Those toters are more than a gallon each, so it wasn't 9,000 toters. It was 9,000 gallons of stuff, paper stuff. Sarah, was that accurate?
Yes, it's the 64-gallon container, and then total, we had 9,000 gallons.
So James or Kathy Woodley, who do a lot of math, can tell us how many
that,
toters
yeah.
that is.
Councilmember Larson.
Well, I'm going to kind of pick on Mr. James today, but only because I know he can take it. I'm really not going to pick on him that much. But I will say, here's the thing about Shred Day. It's kind of it's the event that keeps on paying dividends because it demonstrates the absurdity of government spending in one sense. And I appreciate Mr. James's passionate advocacy for every single funded program that we have, down to and including Shred Day.
So just if I may interrupt, you did not hear me stand up for Schertz Q.
Yeah, that's
very clear.
Fair enough. And I'll take you up on that. Now, the reason I like to highlight it, it's only $5,600, $5,800. I thought it was $10,000 because we did one this year and it ended up being about $5,000, but because we did a second one that was 2-for-1, unexpected, I don't know. But it's still $1.60 per gallon of shredding about, which is almost identical to the price you would get if you went to a private company and paid for your shredding. And to think of shredding as the perfect idea of, it's like once a program exists, it become a sacred cow. Before 2018, Schertz had never even thought of a shred day, and now it's canon. Like, can you imagine people if they don't have shredders? Why don't we have a free haircut day? I don't have haircut shears. I'm sure it'd be popular. And when we talk about these programs in the community passion forum, it's always a different conversation, right? If I go to someone and I say, hey, do you like chocolate? Like, oh yeah, I love chocolate. And I come back, hey, I think I have a market for my $10 chocolate. Everyone I talk to says they love chocolate. Well, then if I go to the people and say, would you like to pay $10 for their chocolate? No, it's ridiculous. I'm paying $10 for that. I found the same thing with Schertz magazine. It's a beautiful magazine. It's a great magazine. If I go to someone and say, hey, do you like Schertz magazine? Oh yeah, it's awesome. I say, well, did you know that the city loses $150,000 a year making that? What? I thought the ads paid for it. It's a different conversation. It's a completely different conversation. And so when we go to the community and say, hey, do you like parks? Would you like more parks? People are going, oh no, I hate parks. We should have more concrete jungles and parking lots. Well, that's not a real conversation. And I want to back up here because here's the trap, and it's not a trick anyone plays, it's just a trick of talking about budgets. Anytime we talk about budgets, somehow cuts. It all becomes about cuts. What we're going to lose. I want to be very clear that when I say we shouldn't raise taxes, I am in no way saying that we should cut funding for any program. And when we say we've lowered the tax rate or we haven't had tax increases, every year for multiple years, maybe there's one exception, our revenue has gone up. And it hasn't been an inconsequential amount. Frequently, it goes up at a higher rate than the population grows, which means the per capita tax burden is increasing. So it's always scary to talk about cuts. Well, what are we going to cut? What are we going to cut? When I propose cut ideas, it's because people always say, well, where's the money going to come from? And I try to give concrete examples. They don't have to be what we do, but it shows that there's opportunity. The idea is we're talking about quality of life and the economic engine, and how do we find that balance? I'm going to tell you that both improve when you narrow your focus. There's a famous book, Good to Great, that talks about major corporations that ascended to greatness and then those that lost. And the common theme throughout that book is that those who lost their greatness, who lost their way, they tried to do too many things. They looked at every opportunity to be great, and they left what they were good at. And so we need to decide what it is we're going to be great at. And we don't have to spread our money around to every new park, every new program, every new green space land. And I think that there is opportunity. And I'm not saying, hey, we should push the staff harder. In fact, I'm saying let's give the same staff the same amount of resources and tell them to narrow their focus. Even the sun has trouble starting a fire without a magnifying glass. You have to focus your resources strategically. And I'm going to use this. I wasn't planning on using this, but it's a joke because Brian James made fun of me. This was not brought here for a prop. There's a long story behind it. But I'm going to try to illustrate my point with this. I don't know how many people know how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Until a week ago, I didn't either, so I might screw this up. But it does make a valid point, one that council can take to heart as well. If solving the Rubik's Cube is our goal, if finding the right balance between quality of life and the economic engine is our goal, we can't achieve that without the right strategy. We can't. If I have Ralph saying, hey, turn the right side, and I've got David Scagliola saying, hey, turn the left side, and Mark Davis is saying, hey, turn this side here. See, I already screwed it up. Let's see if I can get it back. The fact is, whether I get this back to where it needs to be or not is irrelevant, because the point is going to remain the same. The point is going to be, we can't just move randomly. You're not going to be able to solve the Rubik's Cube. You know the secret to the Rubik's Cube? It's not that I can look at this and get real smart, and I'm not going to be able to solve it here because I already screwed up my pattern, but it's a series of intentional algorithms that you apply one layer at a time. You follow a pattern. You make a cross. You follow a distinct pattern to get to second layer and then to get to third layer. Now, if half of council saying, hey, fix the blue side, and half the council saying, hey, fix the green side, we can turn it as fast as we want. We can increase as many people. I can let Ralph have a turn. I can have Mark have a turn. We're never going to get to the end goal that we want. We're not. It just isn't that way. So if every time we have a budget program and every time council has an idea that takes staff resources away from their goal, every time we get to budget season and we say, oh man, every single program we have is sacred. We can't cut a pool. That's a promise we made forever. We can't cut shred day. These people, they don't have a shredder at home. We're never going to get there. And one of the things I think is important to understand is you can significantly improve quality of life by focusing your resources. We can continue to add more resources. We can add $235,000 to park maintenance. But we just found out tonight that New Braunfels spends less than us per person for 551 acres. And we're spending more per person on 370 acres. Now, you talked about all the different funds that go into our Parks and Rec. I think it's also fair to say that we take any shared expenses and put them in a non-departmental fund, not in the Parks and Rec, which I think what our non-departmental fund I saw was like $2.5 million. And IT budgets, you all explained to me, are separated, whereas New Braunfels includes those budgets within the department. So it balances out. At the end of the day, what their budget says and what our budget says is probably pretty accurate. And of course, we include all of Parks and Rec, including Civic Center repairs and in the Parks and Rec budget. That's to be expected. When we talk about raising the taxes, and I'm sorry, I know I'm everywhere. I wasn't prepared for Mr. James's point-by-point defense of every dollar spent. And it's got me thinking. But first, we need to frame it right. One, lost revenue. There is no lost revenue for the city from exemptions. You can't lose revenue you never had a right to. I don't have lost revenue from sale of Amazon stocks. I never owned Amazon stocks. Yeah, if I did, I could have been a billionaire, but I didn't have them. The second thing is our revenue per capita is increasing every year. And finally, I find the shred day goes back to this. There's this caution. Hey, whoa. You're talking about reallocating funds from one program to another. Take it slow. Don't be crazy. Raise taxes immediately. We can talk about that later. I find that to be a challenging mindset to embrace. Why is it okay to immediately apply a budget decrease to the citizens, but we need to slowly take our time to consider any changes we're going to make to cutting programs and reallocating those funds in the city? It's just a challenge to me, and I know there's a lot of people stand up, and some of the common complaints are, hey, I wish more people could go to the budget meetings and can come to council. And I think that's fair. There's a lot of people that come here who make sacrifices to be here, but we also have to understand that a lot of the people who are here who can't afford these tax increases, they're busy picking their kids up from after-school programs and taking them to soccer games and baseball games and basketball games and tutoring. We can't act like the only voice that matters is the one that shows up to council. Now, the people who come to council, their voice absolutely matters, and it's important. But we have an entire community that's going to be impacted by these. And so the idea that, hey, whoa, any talk of cutting a program is something we should take really gently, but we should immediately raise taxes on the citizens to make sure we can fund them all. That's a difficult mindset for me. And it's more difficult for me because I think it's counterproductive. The goal is we want to improve core services, and we want to make sure we maintain a quality of life. And the way to do that isn't to take more money and continue to spread it out evenly. It's clear that if we're sending $65, $68 per person in our Parks and Rec budget for the number of parks that we have, and we're at the level of maintenance that we have, that we're trying to do too much. It'd be really hard to make the argument that we don't have enough money in the Parks and Rec budget because we're nearly double per person any community other than New Braunfels in that department. So either we have too wide of focus, or we don't have enough money. Well, the numbers say we've probably got enough money, so we need to narrow the focus. And we talk about being a premier city. I'll go back to the Rubik's Cube example. A premier city isn't one that does everything that everyone wants. A premier city doesn't add every new park it can add. A premier city doesn't add every new program it can add. A premier city has a focused strategic plan that takes the resources and narrows the gaze so that we can be great at 1, 2, or 3 things instead of handles falling off the doors at 20. Because the reality is, people don't want to use what we have if it's in disrepair. And we don't have to increase resources to fix that. We just need to narrow our focus. Yeah, we have a difficult city. We probably went annexation crazy with having huge L-shaped giant, takes you 30 minutes to drive from one end to the other end. But that's just the reality. Most people are moving here for location. Most people are moving here for schools. And there's a lot of people who are here for the schools who can't afford these tax increases or the $12 a month increase in water over the next 5 years. And when we keep saying, oh, it's just $100, it's just $50, it's just $12 a month, that adds up. And one of the things that the city didn't address, and I don't blame them, I don't know that it's their role to, it's council's role here, is the reality that as we talk about quality of life, and I think we can improve it by narrowing our focus. And we talk about core services, we also have to talk about what it means for the individuals in Schertz. And we know that property taxes are a burden, because I think almost everybody here would support the veterans' disability exemption. And we give them that exemption to help relieve burden off of their shoulders. I think nearly everybody here would support the freeze in tax rates that seniors get, because it helps lift the burden of property taxes that we acknowledge exist off their shoulders. What I'm telling you is there's working class, median income Schertz families who are under incredible stress financially. And when the city makes the decision that shred days and printed magazines and new park expansions are more important than their grocery budget, that's a heavy decision. There's a moral implication to that. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to act like every tax increase is morally wrong, but it certainly is something that needs to be weighed and considered by council before passing it. And finally, I know the sentiment, hey, I don't mind a tax increase. That's not the issue. I think everybody who doesn't mind a tax increase is welcome to send in whatever donations they want. The question is, are you willing to force your neighbor to pay that tax increase? And are you willing to justify every program that the city has and every expenditure the city puts on the line to justify using the force of law to make them pay that extra? Because that's ultimately what it is. So is it worth a second outdoor pool or third pool? Is it worth a printed magazine to force your neighbor to do that? And obviously I say absolutely not.
Okay.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Just a quick comment. No, the city does have not lost revenue, but a shortfall in tax revenue due to exemptions, court fees, and yet at the same time, we're seeing an increase in population here. You know, it's amazing to see the residents come out here supporting the tax increase. They have genuine concerns whether or not we can provide the court services if we don't have the increase. Mr. James, Mr. Walters, you provided a great presentation where residents understand our dilemma regarding the tax budget, and I thank you for that.
Councilmember Davis.
I love these discussions, and I have been attending city council since I moved here in 2007. And spent a lot of time sitting out there. And I think this is probably the biggest discussion I ever recall having on budget in the 11 years that I've lived in this community. I appreciate Councilman Larson's passion, and I agree with about 50% of it. I absolutely agree that we need to look for efficiencies. We need to make those hard calls on what we should and should not do. But I find some faults in his logic. I'm like you. I don't own Amazon stock, so I can't sell it, so that's a moot point. I don't agree with the impact on the lost ticket revenue, because it probably should have never been up to $1.4 million anyway. It's a change in focus on what our police department does, and that's an internal decision. And I think it's the right one to lean more towards community policing. As far as the other $1.4 million, that is lost revenue. And I'll clearly explain it. When you build a house in Schertz that's $200,000 or $250,000 or $300,000, that has a revenue that's generated from that based on the property tax rate. Whether it's the current rate, the effective rate, the rollback rate, it generates revenue. Now, if that resident is owned by an active duty military member, they're paying that tax rate. When they retire and get a disability rating, courtesy of the Veterans Administration and based on a law that's passed by the state of Texas, that revenue goes away. It was revenue, it now goes away. If that residence, that piece of property is owned by a civilian who never served in the military, we're collecting revenue on that. If they sell it and they sell it to someone who gets a veteran's exemption, we now lost that revenue. So that's a hard piece of property that clearly should be generating revenue for the city, but due to a situation beyond our control, it no longer does. And again, as the staff pointed out, that's about a $1.4 million impact on our community. Going to the rollback rate doesn't come close to generating that lost revenue, and that is in fact hard lost revenue. I've been on council for 2 years now, and I can tell you, and I appreciate your perspective on needs and wants, but what I've learned over the past 2 years is people have different perspectives on what needs are and what wants are. The business community has a different perspective on needs and wants. The residents have different perspective on needs and wants. What you might call a need or a want, somebody else will call a need. I can tell you that in 2 years, I have not had a single resident call me up and said, why are we spending money on this? Why did we build a new library? Why did we build an auditorium? Every phone call I've gotten, every email I've gotten has been essentially, come out and take a look at this park and tell me why you're not fixing it. I've had dozens of emails from people saying, when are you going to pave this road? When are you going to fix Maskey Road? When are you going to fix Schertz Parkway? What I've seen in the budget presented this year, and it all comes out of our budget discussions that we've had multiple with the council and stemming from last year, the question has been, tell us what we should be doing, tell us what we're not doing. And I think the staff has done an admirable job of telling us this year, for the first time since I can recall, and like I said, I've been sitting in these meetings for 11 years, 9 of them out there and 2 of them up here. This is the first time I can recall where the staff has said, hey, basically we've been kicking the can down the road and we've not been taking care of things. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. We've had an increase in revenue. You're absolutely right, Mr. Larson. Property values go up and our revenue stream has gone up, but we've tempered that by lowering our tax rate in 4 of the last 5 years. And 1 year we just kept it the same. And if you look at our current INS rate, it's higher now than it was in 2011, 7 years ago, which means we devote more of our revenue stream towards borrowing money to fix things and pay it back later with interest. And I've said before, I think my goal is to see if we can crack that cycle and start taking care of the things that we need to be taken care of, like that air conditioning unit that's broken in the back of the building, like our parks that are in need of significant repair in a lot of cases. Now, we talk about adding park space, but the reality of it is the city has not added park space with our city tax dollars. We've added Cypress Point. I know because I wrote the Parks Master Plan, and I know what we've added in the past couple of years. We've added Cypress Point Park. That was done by a developer as part of their development. And once it's all built and done, the keys are turned over to the city, and now we're responsible for maintaining it. Luckily, there's nothing for us to do because it's a brand new park. It's the ones that we've had for a while that we're not maintaining. I'd be more than happy after the meeting to show anybody some of the pictures from Wendy Swan Park, which has been a city park for a long time and is in dire need of maintenance. Ashley Park, Pickerel Park. The last time we did a drive around of the parks, I sort of left the group and went off of my own and documented a lot of pictures. And like the staff showed us in their budget proposal, they want to increase the parks maintenance budget by about $235,000 to work on a list of $850,000 that they're estimating in deferred maintenance on existing parklands. I can tell you, I looked at that list, and none of that list is on things like Cypress Point or Rhine Valley or any of the new parks that have been added to the inventory over the past several years. I think the only place where we've really added significant parks money is on Mary Burke's Park up on the Schertz Parkway. And what was the total addition for that?
It's about $65,000.
And most of that money came out of
the parkland dedication.
The parkland dedication fee, which again is not tax dollars. It's money that is generated from new development, because a new developer can either build a park or build an HOA park, or they can pay money. And that, okay, we'll call it a tax, but it's not a tax on the residents, it's a tax on the developer. You know, I saw an article today that caught my eye, and it said, it was an article on CNBC that said, Americans are flocking to these 15 cities where jobs are plentiful, salaries are rising, and business is booming. And it gave the top 15 cities. The number one city on that list was Austin. There were 4 cities in Texas in the top 10. Number 1 was Austin, number 9 was San Antonio. And we are smack dab in the middle of those 2 metropolitan areas. If we don't maintain what we've got, and I agree with you, there are some cases where we probably should not add new services. And there are some cases where we may have to make a hard call and say, are we really doing the right thing for our community? But I think that takes community input, not just blindly saying, well, I don't think we need a Wendy Swan or a Pickle Park pool. I think it takes community input, and I think we should go out and get that, and that should play even more heavily into next year's budget. But the fact of the matter is, we have not been taking care of our city in an appropriate manner over the past several years. Our roads show that, our parks show that, our facilities show that. We've had briefings on what it took to maintain or rehab Fire Station number 2, because we deferred it and kicked the can down the road forever and a day, and the end result is it cost us more money to fix that than had we fixed it when we knew there was a problem. So to me, it's about breaking that cycle. I'm not happy about raising the tax rate to the rollback rate of 51.46. The reality of it is we're on par with a lot of our surrounding communities. We're still 4.5. If we go to the rollback rate, we are still 4.5 cents behind San Antonio, which was number 9 on that list. The next biggest town, again, New Braunfels seems to be doing a lot of good things, and they have the capability to generate revenue to offset some of these programs. The next town up from that is San Marcos, and I believe their current tax rate is 61 cents per 100, which is 10 cents more than what we're talking about for the rollback rate. Now, again, I'm very hesitant. I want to be clear about this. I'm hesitant about comparing ourselves to other towns, because each town is a unique entity, and they have their own individual problems. Virtually all of the feedback that I have received in the past month and a half on tax rates has been positive. Virtually all of the negative comments I've heard have been from non-Schertz residents. You know, I've heard people say, well, geez, look at Selma. Again, Selma's a different community. They're 5 square miles, we're 28 square miles. They get 50% of their tax base in sales tax revenue because they own 75% of the forum. We get 26% of our revenue from sales tax. So to me, it's a matter of doing what's right for our community. Mr. James, thank you for putting up the slide up there that talked about refreshing us on the customer surveys of what they want. They want a quality of life. Affordability came in 4 on the list. Quality of life came out number 1. Quality doesn't have to cost money. I agree with you. There's ways we can work that issue, but just throwing out arbitrary things to cut. without all the facts, without all solid numbers, I don't think is the right way to make a sound decision for the community. You saw the numbers that Mr. James presented, the attendance this year for the Pickerel Park pool, 12,000 people. We're a town of 40,000 people. Again, I wrote the parks master plan. I know how many pools we have. I know one of the things that impacts that are all these HOA pools. All these personal pools impact it. I'm paying for my own pool in my backyard. But we have 12,000 visitors going to the Pickerel Park pool. I can tell you who those 12,000 people are. They're not the people that live in an HOA that have an HOA pool in their backyard or have a pool in their backyard at their house. They're not the people that have an HOA pool that they can go to that they're supporting. It's a city amenity that they're using. That's 25% of our population.
It's number of visits, to be clear, so it's probably not 12,000 different people. But yeah.
It's a significant load on there. So, again, I'm not saying that the answer is not to close Pickerel Park Pool or look at how we operate Wendy Swan Pool. But the reality of it is, I think we owe it to our residents to get some current information, some updated facts, find out what exactly they want. Again, I haven't had residents call me and say, you know what, this park in my neighborhood is a nuisance, we should shut it down. The phone calls I'm getting are, why is the slide broken? Why is the playscape broken? When are you going to replace the basketball nets? When are you going to seal this street, fix this sidewalk? And the singular biggest line item in this budget is increased dollars for maintenance for parks, for streets, for facilities. Which, again, if you drive around the city and you take a look at those three areas, if you can't see the need for the extra dollars, and I honestly don't know what you're looking at. That's it, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Have we gone around once? Dr. Kaiser? No. Okay, okay, we've gone around once. Well, I didn't get a chance to speak. Oh, Bert. Mr. Crawford, did you lead it off?
I can speak when you get through.
I can't hear you.
When you get through, I'll speak if that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hey, I think we do this budget talk and then the tax rate kind of backwards. We really do, because it's you gotta approve this budget, because if you don't approve the budget, then you can't approve the tax rate, because it's the tax rate that's paying for the budget. Well, quite frankly, I think that's a little erroneous also, because an increase in the budget doesn't necessarily mean you need to increase taxes if you have additional revenues that are coming in, or you have monies set aside for such contingencies, which is why we establish contingency funds. 2, I don't like playing a game of line item veto, especially not condensed into a time like this where it becomes way too emotional, and quite frankly, it becomes way too political. I don't need to go there. I like option 3. The only problem I have with option 3 is that we aren't really doing much of anything right now. I think what Councilmember Larson alluded to the other day is he likes to take aim and then shoot, which is highly recommended for any marksman out there. I like that philosophy. I don't like the Nancy Pelosi thing. Well, we gotta approve this so we know what's in it. That's absolutely ridiculous. I have the utmost respect for staff. You know that. Staff does a tremendous job. When we started going with the 5-year budget, oh yeah, we're moving in the right direction now. So we got the 5-year budget pretty much worked out. Well, it is adequate to meet the needs and the wants of the previous years and do some forward forecasting. But it doesn't really forecast the needs of tomorrow. We talk about the roads, $11 million for a road. If I got the math right, that's increasing taxes by 30 cents. Increasing taxes this year wouldn't it be a drop in the bucket on that $11 million, plus another 5 or so for other items out there. It doesn't even begin to address it. So we have to do this because, oh my gosh, I'm not buying it. I'm really not. Quite frankly, we do have the money in the reserves to cover the increase if we stuck with the current rate. And I'm not even proposing we go down to the effective rate. That's another half a cent, 3/4 of a cent below the current rate. Yeah, somewhere around there. I'm not even proposing that. This budget is sufficient, but what I'd like to see is that we use the rate we have right now, and then let's have some honest, open, and transparent talks about where we can cut in the future, so that we aren't firing and then taking aim. We can actually aim and take fire. And as we capture the potential savings that are out there, if there are potential savings out there, guess where they go? They'll go directly into the reserves. So we're really borrowing money from ourselves that we kind of sort of made a promise to repay within the next year. That's my assessment of this. I apologize, Councilmember Crawford. What did you have to say?
Thank you. Mr. James?
Yes, sir.
The comments that Mr. Bolter made about cutting things but taking the time to sort them out, is that something we could look at, that I can ask staff to look at doing this coming fiscal year? So every quarter, maybe you have a chance to look at 2 or 3 things that you might want to see that need to be cut and work out the plan how to get that sorted out in a more less stressful way, less stressful way, not more anything.
I think what staff, to be clear, is proposing is that over the course of the next year, and really we're probably talking 8 months, work very hard to hit those items and talk about what are the programs we're doing, do they still add value, what are the alternatives, can we do them more efficiently, do we need to just drop them, do we need to do something else? So I think that's what we're recommending, is over the course of the next year, as we said, revisit all of those programs, have an understanding of it, solicit input from our residents and businesses and say, what do you think about this change? And then come back at it. I can appreciate the comment, well, let's do that first and see where we are. But fundamentally, and I heard a number of comments, this is the first year that staff walked us through and talked about this. We haven't touched on everything. As Councilman Scagliola said, we've done the roadway impact fee. Our recommendation, let's see how much money we start generating and see where that gets. So let's not start raising money for that just yet for new road construction. Let's see where we add. But frankly, one of the items tonight that you approved was to not accept any bids for drainage work. The reason is because the bids came in too high. We cannot afford it. We are going to make some cuts and adjustments and changes, go back at it, but frankly, we will be tapping our drainage fund, correct, James? And there's not money now. We're spending it all on a bunch of stuff. So unfortunately, while we're going to have some conversations, we're going to talk, and we're going to see what we can do. If that fix that we hear from residents is too great, we're going to have to wait it out. And that's the reality of it. And so my point with, and I would normally agree, let's not raise taxes if we haven't figured out. As we talk about programs to cuts, we're also going to be talking about things to say, where are we relative to this? And there are other things that, again, we are not keeping up with or we want to do better, which is why we're saying fundamentally, let's raise it. Let's raise it enough to make a dent on the things that we know are problematic. And then, frankly, if we decide to cut Schertz Q or whatever it is, and again, not saying every program should stay, I think we're going to find stuff that we need to put the money at, like fixing some of the things that we talked about tonight. I can appreciate the comments on the drainage at the Jack in the Box 7-Eleven site. That's a bigger, more costly issue. You heard the comment about the Simmons real estate. Some of you may recall that got hung up because of a drainage issue that, per our code, because it wasn't developed already, we would not let them move forward with. We partnered with TxDOT, did some things, created some regional improvements, and that's why that happened. So we have these problems out there that we need to fund. So from a staff perspective, as we make these cuts over the year, we're going to find a lot of stuff that we need to be doing better that we will shift that to, as opposed to hey, I've got a lot of extra money, I don't need it. Because again, we grow every year, so the cost of service grows. Generally, the cost of providing that service grows because of cost of things going up. And what we typically hear about, you're right, are people wanting new programs. And point well taken, we need to look at the old ones and say, what do we drop back, what do we cut, and we're going to work on that this year. But fundamentally, I don't think we're going to be standing here a year from now and say, wow, we found a whole lot to cut, I've got a windfall. If we do, we can cut back. But I think we have plenty of things that we hear about now that frankly there's not money for, like the drainage problem in the neighborhood on a not very hard rain. But our drainage fund is tapped, and you had to cancel a series of projects because we couldn't even afford that tonight. For what it's worth,
Mr. James, I'd like to make that sort of a formal, could you give us some kind of brief every quarter about what y'all are looking at so we know, so council knows as the year goes by, whether I'm here or not, how things are going on the budget? Because I'll be the first to tell you, and we talked about it today, if we don't have a good turnout at the Shred Day in October, I don't think we need to do one again.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, frankly,
that's
what
an easy
we'll see with
decision.
Shred Day is I think we're going to see Shred Day over time. People get rid of that 30 years, and it'll start to go down. So I think we can kind of decrease cost a bit. We probably roll it in with the community cleanup and get there. So, yeah, we can do that. And on the policy stuff, we'll have those conversations with council and the community about what we do.
But something that you let council know through the year that we're looking at these 5 programs or something that just so we have that, for lack of a overused word, transparency, that things are being looked at now instead of having to worry about the crisis of getting things done between now and the 30th of September.
Yes, sir.
Because we do have to have a budget and a tax rate.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaiser?
Ryan, I think you guys have done an excellent job presenting this information to the community and to the council. I don't think in any way this was any type of flippant decision on your part to ask for the budget, to ask for the tax increase. You know, there are programs that, hey, you want to just cut back to, yeah, you know, you want to start throwing things out, sure, we can do that. I can tell you quality of life will go down. There's a lot of talk about, you know, the Schertz magazine going all digital. You know, we talk about people who don't have access. There will be a lot of people in this city that will not have access to information. And that's to me is wrong. So we're going to have some things that some people are going to say are not needs, but they're wants. And what may be a want for me, you know, I'm fine. I might be able to say, hey, I can go online and read that. There are a lot of people that we'd be saying, too bad. You know, we're going to take that away because that's not, you know, a need. But I do appreciate the openness. Costs have increased. I mean, I don't think anyone can say, you know, I know when I go to H-E-B, my grocery bill has increased. Costs for the city have increased, whether it's hiring new employees, and how many open positions do we still have that need to be filled?
I couldn't even tell you. I can tell you we have a number that have been there for a long time that we struggle. Frankly, I know staff is hopeful that with this last round of class and comp, that some of those positions we have struggled because of the increase, we'll have more luck with those.
See, and even it goes even to that. We're pretty much at a standstill on some of those positions. If we were to fill every position tomorrow that's open, we'd be in trouble.
Yes.
And so, again, I don't think this is flippant. It wasn't taken lightly to ask for this, and I think, you know, it's very reasonable what you're asking for.
Okay, let me read the caption, and then after we, if we do get a motion, we can continue discussion. No? What? Okay. Councilmember Edwards, then.
I do want to clear up a couple of things. Councilman Larson, you brought up the annexation problem that we had. Well, a few years ago, you guys will remember this, about 6 years ago, we had several people come to us that owned very large tracts of land and said, please annex us. The reason why is because we had a slew of development that was about to happen that was going to be considered substandard. That's the way we felt about that development. We could not allow that to happen. So we took that large parcel of land in, and if I'm not mistaken, that was a historical annexation for not for the city of Schertz, but for the whole state of Texas. That was a very large annexation. So we took that in to protect this environment, to protect our citizens as well. Second thing, back in 1999, I had an opportunity to listen to Mr. Sam Barshop. Many of you probably don't even know who Barshop Olds is. But he came over to, well, James, you know, Mr. Brian James, you know him because of San Antonio, of course. But I listened to him at the Randolph Metrocom Chamber of Commerce one day speak about the coalition, the I-35 coalition, going from San Antonio, you remember that, Dudley? Going from San Antonio all the way to Austin. He said that one day you're going to be able to get in your car and drive and not even recognize that you have left San Antonio. Now, I kind of phrase that differently. I say you're going to get in your car from Schertz and you're going to drive up and recognize that you have not left Schertz. Guys, it is a continuous build over and over. We see this demographic starting to change. Mr. Davis is absolutely correct. Guys, we are very unique in what we are, but at the same token, we have a huge responsibility. Not for us. Remember 1974, the largest tax increase in the city. Think about that. But if we had not, if the forefathers had not done that, you would not have that water company right now. You would not have Schertz Seguin local government corporations. We're sitting on the precipice of another thing right now. Cibolo Valley Local Government Corporation. Guys, our neighbors need water. We need water. Water is a resource that we cannot be without. It is absolutely paramount that we go forward. Now, and what are they asking for? 800,000, 850 per city to pitch in for at this point?
I think at this point to kick in.
Yeah. So that's another 850,000. Guys, it's important that we understand not only why we do things, but why we're going forward. It's important that we understand.
Yes, sir. 480 per city.
480 per city. So if that's the case, I'm gonna take a stab at this, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, I'm sorry. I yield my time to Mr. Davis.
Just one clarification. Mayor Pro Tem brought up the reserve fund. Over the past several years, our reserve fund went down, and we spent the past several years rebuilding it to the point now where it exceeded the 25%. That was our goal. We've had several budget discussions to set the budget reserve at 26%, 25 purely for emergencies, flood, tornado, earthquake, meteorite hit, I don't care what it is, but a true emergency, with the 1% for other contingencies. And we're in the process, if I remember the budget slides we've been showing, of drawing down that budget reserve back down to 26%. If I'm not mistaken, that drawdown is factored into our budget plans, correct?
That's correct.
So it's not as though we can say, well, we can just take the excess out of the reserve fund because that's built into this budget process. And if we're going to go with the mindset of, well, let's just stay at our current rate or go to the effective rate and take that, what we're referring as excess money in the reserves, the reality of it is we're still just kicking deferred maintenance down the road because we've already programmed that money in the reserves for our budget process over the next couple of years. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. It's not like we're sitting on excess money in a cash account that we could just say, well, let's keep our rates the same and we'll just pull money out of the bank account and cover this stuff. That's already factored in.
Okay, I think we went around enough. Let me read the caption, and then we can open it up for another round if you're so inclined. Ordinance number 18T32. It's an ordinance adopting a budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018, and ending September 30th, 2018. All right. How about 2019? in accordance with the charter of the city of Schertz, Texas, providing for the filing of the budget, providing that this ordinance shall be cumulative of all ordinances, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. We've had our discussions. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 18T32.
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Dr. Kaiser. I'll open it up for continued discussion at this time. Councilmember Crawford? Dr. Kaiser? Councilmember Edwards?
The reason why I showed that photo earlier was because we actually were going to be discussing drainage anyway. So I just wanted you to know that.
Councilmember Davis?
I'm sorry.
Did you have any further comments?
No.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
No comments.
Councilmember Larson? I have no further comments, except for the reserve fund. Quite frankly, we ran that up to 40%, and there was a lot of delayed maintenance involved in that process, and now we are trying to play catch-up on it. That was the only comment I had on that issue. Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Nay. We have 5 ayes and 2 nays. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, once again, a public hearing on the proposed tax rate. Conduct a public hearing in consideration and/or action regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 2018-19 tax rate. And this is required for the second public hearing. So we'll let staff start and then open it up for a public discussion.
I'll turn this over very quickly to James, but just in light of this, I want to point out that, currently where we are is our tax rate is $49.11 per $100 valuation. We're looking to go up to $51.46. Again, we allocate $34.97 for maintenance and operation and $16.49 for the INS portion. So that's the gist of it.
I did want to bring this up. So there is a specific motion that must be made when adopting the tax rate, as well as a minimum number of council members that need to vote in favor for the motion to pass. So since we have 7 council members, we need 5 council members to vote in favor of any motion, and the motion must be what's stated on the screen. So it states the tax rate that the council member is proposing, and then a percentage increase over the effective rate of $48.92.
Keep that one handy.
Got my calculator as well, just in case. That's all I have, sir.
Very well. This is conduct a public hearing in consideration or action regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 2018-2019 tax rate. And we've heard from staff. It is 9:01. Let's open it up for a public hearing, if there are any takers. And once again, would you please state your name and address?
John Sullivan, 513 Triple Crown. I just want to make a point that all of these things play together. I mean, you don't just move to a community that has good schools and good parks and expect to have a really low tax rate. I mean, I moved here, I did some research, I looked at the website. It says we live in a premier community. It says we care about parks. It says we have good schools. It says, my neighborhood, it looks like we have good roads. And then, I get involved in the city care. I see the vision. They care about these things. And now some people on council are saying that we need to subsidize our quality of life for lower taxes for people who can't afford to live here. And I'm not okay with that. That's not why I chose to move here. So I just want to make that point. The rollback rate is reasonable. It's actually probably not even going to fix most of our problems. And in any time that residents expect it, the people that I talk to expect it. So let's just go to the rollback rate, make it reasonable. That's a good compromise in my opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else? (902). Okay, let's turn this over to the council for any discussion right now. Councilmember Larson.
Well, I just want to clarify, I don't want my thoughts to be misrepresented. First off, lowering the tax rate is not asking anyone to subsidize anything. Raising the tax rate is asking your neighbors to subsidize the quality of life you want. So that's literally the opposite. But beyond that, I don't think we need to ask our neighbors to subsidize all of our hopes and dreams, because my entire point is we can increase the quality of life by taking the current pool of resources, which is more than big enough, because I think last year the revenues increased 11% over previous year, and the population growth was significantly less than 11%. If you add in population growth plus inflation, you're still not 11%. So our revenues are increasing per capita faster than the combination of population and inflation growth, meaning the net real dollars the city has to spend are increasing. And by taking those same resources and focusing on fewer things, we would improve the quality of life instead of having everything we hope and dream for at half quality. And the rollback rate is not really a compromise. That's literally the highest we can go without giving citizens a chance to recall it.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
No comment.
Councilmember Davis.
No comment.
Councilmember Crawford.
No comment.
Councilmember Kaiser.
No comment.
And Councilmember Edwards.
No comment, sir.
Well, we've come to the point where we need to make a motion on the tax rate, and quite frankly, I'm partial to the .4910. So, Mr. James Walters, could you put that statement up there, please? You know what's really interesting is, regardless, this is a tax increase. I need your calculator to figure out what a .4911 increase would be. What we have right here is for the .5146.
So if we went with the 4910, it would be a 0.3% increase. I looked at that before.
Okay, 3%. Is that what our
0.3?
Is that what our current rate is right now? .4910?
Yes, sir.
Well, then I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a rate of .4910, which is effectively a 3% increase in the tax rate. 0.3.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any need for discussion? Councilmember Davis.
No, sir. No discussion.
No. No discussion. I'll call for a vote. I vote aye.
Nay.
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 Aye.
I have 5 nays and 2 ayes. Motion does not pass. Do I hear another motion?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion, and I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of .5146, which is effectively a 5% increase in the tax rate.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and I did read the caption, right? Okay. So I have a motion and a second. Any comments from the council?
I absolutely have a comment. I recognize to the citizens that will view this later to understand that I realize that I'm raising my own taxes. I realize that I'm raising your taxes. I will hold staff accountable for them streamlining and coming to efficiencies, but realize I am well aware of what I am doing.
Councilmember Crawford.
We don't need to read this again with the correct rate on it?
No, sir.
Okay.
I have a motion made by Councilmember Edwards and seconded by Councilmember Kaiser. There being no further discussion, call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Nay.
Nay. And the ayes have it, 5-2. Motion passed. Thank you, staff, so very much. It's always a little bit painful putting you through this. I can feel you cringe, and for some reason getting a little sweaty up here too. I just don't know the reason for that. Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Dennis, please.
Consent agenda consists of items 1 through 3, 5, and 6. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 4, resolution number 18R108. Motion was made by Councilmember Gutierrez, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 7, ordinance number 18S29 on final reading. A motion was made by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser voted yes. Councilmember Crawford voted no. Motion passed. Item number 8, ordinance number 18T32. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola and Councilmember Larson voted no. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 9, ordinance number 18T33. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Kaiser, to set the rate at .5146, property tax rate be increased by the rate of 5.46, which is effectively a 5% increase in that tax rate. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola and Councilmembers Larson voted no. Councilmember Davis, Gutierrez, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. And next item on the agenda is a workshop, discussion, possible action regarding the City of Schertz Interview Committee. Ms. Dennis?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. We talked about this back on June 28th. We've given y'all lots of time to ponder, think about things, how you want the interview committee, made up of. I kind of thought about it also myself, and since that time, I did have the Planning and Zoning Commissioner join the last interview committee session, which was Michael Dalla. I'm making a recommendation to you, and then we can talk about it. I recommend that the interview committee consists of 2 council members, the chairs of Planning and Zoning, Economic Development, and the Transportation Safety Advisory Commission. I feel that with the addition of the TSAC, Transportation, this will add lots of value. I feel the diversity of the members that I'm recommending will provide a fair and equitable balance of knowledge of the city and experience, and bring those recommendations to council. I'll open it up to you guys and let you tell me what y'all want to do.
Very well. We heard the recommendations from our city secretary. Any comments? Councilmember Crawford.
You and I talked informally about, at least I talked with you informally about having a member from each committee from which somebody was to be selected, for which somebody was to be selected. That way we'd have current knowledge on the board to ask them intelligent questions, not relying on council members, whether it's 2, 3, 4, whatever. So that's a comment that I made.
So what you were recommending, that you want a member from each boards and commissions to
I
sit?
wanted a member, and they don't have to be permanently appointed members, but I wanted, if we had 3 different boards or committees that had members to be selected that night, we talked about having a member from each one of those boards on the committee that selects, so they could ask questions that make sense. Because I was on planning and zoning, but I wasn't on TSAC.
Correct.
Mark was on, TSAC and parks. That kind of a concept.
I do understand what you're asking. That's going to take a lot more staff time to try to make sure that, say if we've got empty spaces on a library, I have to make sure I get a hold of a library person and set that date so that everybody's coordinated. I understand your idea, but personally, it would take a lot more staff work to bring in, a member from the library if there's a library vacancy. My recommendation is the individuals that are chairs, they have been in the city for a long time. They have knowledge, not only of planning and zoning, but they do have knowledge of the other boards and commissions.
I stand by what I said, that I think having a member from a board, the chairman or the senior member on the board, be there to be able to ask good questions for somebody who we're trying to select to put on a committee, because being on a committee and picking the right person has a lot of value to it. And I'm just expressing my concerns about the equity of a good interview. I have to rely on somebody from EDC or somebody from another board to ask the questions about the specific board, because I don't know all the details. That's all I'm saying. It would take a little bit more time, but I would like to think it had a value to selecting a good member, or the appropriate member, however you want to phrase that.
Councilmember Edwards.
Let's just call this what it was. This was not a problem until what happened recently a few weeks ago when we had a previous council member not allowed to be on a committee. However, this could have been prevented, as we had talked about previously, because I brought up reservation about that. That was voiced during that meeting of the interview committee. So with that being said, the reason why we're making this change is because of that. It was pushed, illustrated, of course. I don't mind if someone sits on a committee. I don't. The changes here, I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. But we're on a slippery slope here. When things don't go your way, you want to make a change. Is that what we're trying to do now? Is that how we're governing? That's the problem, guys. If things don't go your way, you want to make a change. And that's not conducive of what we have decided, and it's not what we've done in the past as well. Not saying that the past is always right. Not saying that. I'm simply saying that it was done for one particular reason. It created a lot of instances on the dais, a lot of things that were done that were, basically unprofessional. It really did. So, if this change is conducive to what my colleagues on the dais want to do, I don't have a problem with it.
Councilmember Davis, you sit on the committee's interview committee. What's your take on this?
I have to agree. 99% of the time that we've been acting under the current process, there's been no issues, no concern, no commentary to the otherwise. And then just recently, we had a recommendation and a discussion that ultimately came to council, and council had a problem with, and now the question is, or the recommendation is to change the process. I've seen that happen before from this council. It happened with this council before with how we select the mayor pro tem. And as we can see now, we've just gone full circle and we've gone back to how we used to do it in the past. So I'm not convinced that necessarily making any changes to our interview process warrants a change. We haven't had a problem in the past. We've had a spirited discussion and some dissension on the recommendations of the interview panel recently, but we moved through it. To me, that's one of the reasons why we're up here is to speak our mind and, as was said earlier, vote our conscience and make a decision. The decisions that we make, every decision I make up here, I make a friend and I make an enemy and I make someone happy and I make someone sad. And at the end of the day, I vote my conscience and I vote my convictions, and it is what it is. So I myself don't see the need to change anything. If it's not broke, don't fix it, and I don't think it's broke.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Ms. Dennis, how many boards and committees do we have total?
Oh, goodness.
Exactly. Logistically, it'd be impossible to get one from every board or committee to be made available for a specific date, specific time to conduct several interviews. I agree with my colleagues here. I do like the fact that you put the most important committees as part of the interviews. Therefore, I think your points are well taken. I think the breakout is exactly what we need. You get those three important positions in there and conduct the interviews. I don't have anything else to say, but I think that you did a good job just thinking this over. Thanks.
Councilmember Larson.
Mr. Davis and Mr. Edwards were nice to not name me, but I'll just say it. I was the one that asked for this. The history of my perception is we had a process. The process broke. It was embarrassing for the city, so I said, let's evaluate the process. I think if something doesn't go your way and the process breaks, evaluating the process is the responsible thing to do, although the determination may very well be it didn't work that time, but it's still the best process. Ultimately, what happened that caused me to ask for you to look into this was a majority of the members present at the recommendation interview committee said they wanted to make a recommendation, and then the same members who were part of the committee that sent the recommendation had a problem with the recommendation. That's fine. People change their minds. There could be confusion, but the reason the process broke wasn't because anybody was wrong in saying what they believe. It was because there's too many council members represented on the committee. And so you can't have a majority of council members be the people making a recommendation to council, and then those same people who recommended the recommendation to council say they don't recommend the recommendation to council anymore. It's confusing, right? That's why I was that confused when it happened. It was crazy. And so that's why I asked that it be looked at. I don't feel that passionately about it. Look, the process obviously broke. It was embarrassing to the city. It was unfair to some of our residents. If it's a one out of a million and it's not worth fixing, that's fine. I think it makes sense to dilute the council's power on the interview committee, because ultimately we're going to have the ability to review the recommendation anyways. So having a smaller representation of council and a greater representation of the boards and committees that these individuals are going to actually serve on makes absolutely logical sense. It's probably the most reasonable thing to do, but my question to you, and this is something that Mr. James has pointed out to me that I need to be more cognizant of, is if we did make the change that you're recommending, and one, I asked you to look into this, so I've already taken resources from your day time-wise that I probably should have considered more carefully, and I think all of council should in the future. But if we implemented the recommendation you've brought, would that cause a significant change in the resources you have to expend to
No, actually,
organize these?
just thinking about this, I did contact the TSAC chair, and he'd be very willing to sit on it. Now, as far as what this means is there's 3 council members right now. What this means, it'll go to 2, and then I'm increasing, the chair from the TSAC.
So, and for me, like I said, I'm not going to get into. I spent all my political capital arguing against the tax rate we just increased. I'm not going to do it over this, but I think I will say I think it makes sense to have the boards and commission members play a larger role in the recommendation to council, and council to play a smaller role in that part, because ultimately we still have the final say on the dice.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Davis.
You know, again, I'm not an advocate of change for the sake of change, but I understand the logic of 2 council members and 3 board presidents. I would argue that, from my experience, the board president from Parks and Rec is probably more important than the board member from TSAC, because they deal with a lot of quality of life issues, and that's a bigger component of the city than speed humps and speeders. But anyway, to Mr. Larson's point, and tying it in with my comments on changing for change, you're absolutely right. We had an instance where a recommendation came from the board or from the interview panel, and at some point, upon reflection, there was a change made by a council member. So if we go to 3 board presidents and 2 council members, and the next time where the board recommends an appointment and one of the 2 council members comes up here and has a change of heart or a moment of reflection and decides to vote against the recommendation, then what's the next way going forward? Do we turn around now and drop it down to 1 council member and 4 board members? Or do we just turn around and take the council members? I mean, I get it. I just don't see whether it's 2 or whether it's 3. The bottom line is someone changed their mind and they're entitled to do that. So if you want to change the process, and I'm not against saying that our process is perfect, but if you're going to change the process, the city secretary had other options in there. Some of the other communities around us, and I'm not a fan of saying let's do it like City A or City B, because they've got their own rules. If you're going to change the process, then make a wholesale change to the process. Let's set up a date on a Saturday where the entire council comes in here, and the people that want to get on a board and commission are interviewed by the entire council all at one shot. Because again, changing the current process from 3 council members to 2 council members doesn't eliminate the concern that you brought up.
To respond, it doesn't eliminate the entire concern I brought up, but it does eliminate probably the most fundamental concern, which is the boards and commissioners would have a greater say in who serves on the boards and commissioners.
Okay, it's kind of spirited, and I kind of like that. One of the problems we have with allowing the boards and commissions to choose their own members is that how quickly does it generate into a good old boys club or a good old girls club? Do we really want that to happen? It's the city council. It's the city council that's also ultimately responsible for appointing individuals. Yeah, I hear about one board or commission being more important or than another. I don't even go there. I think all the boards and commissions bring a certain value to the community. And the people who serve on these boards and commissions, they're all respected in my book, because they're giving of themselves to contribute to the community in the way they think is most appropriate. Now, is there a problem with the way the boards and commissions are or the interview committee is set up? Quite frankly, I don't believe there is. I like the idea of having the expertise, and to go back to Councilmember Crawford's point, yeah, it'd be really nice to have somebody not there all the time, because we don't always have people who want to be on the TSAC or the library board or the historics board. We don't always have them coming asking to be placed on those boards. So you really wouldn't need a cast of thousands at every single one of these interview committees. Quite frankly, to keep from making things too complicated, I recommend we keep things the way they are. I like the idea of having P&Z represented. I like EDC's representation there. I learn a lot from them. Now, if you wanted to include others, you know what? Okay. You could probably do that. But I don't like the idea of going down to 2 council members. I think 3 is the appropriate number. Is there any other discussion? There being no further discussion, I don't know, do we need to make a motion to change anything that?
if the consensus of the council is not to change, then, that's fine. And then I can take into consideration, like you said, that, if we have vacancies, on library or something, maybe I can bring somebody in. I don't think that y'all would mind. I can try to do that, just like, when I talked to the TSAC person. So this was just another suggestion for you, but if the consensus of council is just to leave it alone, that's great.
I like that,
Mr. Mayor
that
Pro
option. Excuse me?
Since it's on the agenda for discussion and possible action, I'll make a motion that we make no changes to the current interview process.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Davis and a second by Councilmember Edwards to keep the rules and procedures and policies the same.
No change. Yeah, no change for
And no changes. Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 And the vote is unanimous. Motion passes. Okay, roll call vote confirmation.
Okay, the workshop, motion was made by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Councilmember Edwards, to make no change in the interview committee. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Next item on the agenda is a closed session. City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551074, Texas Government Code. Before I read it all, is there any need for a closed session tonight? Seeing no need for a closed session, I won't continue reading. No action required. No roll call vote needed. Request and announcements. Have announcements by the acting city manager.
Only thing I have is some of you may have noticed Lisa Woodenback. She had one item on the agenda. Today was her birthday, but just wanted to be here in case anything popped up. As it was, Emily Gropey was able to handle it all just fine. So, but kudos to her for that dedication.
Mr. Dudley, you have anything for us? Your opportunity. Just have a nice day, right? Okay, fine.
Open it up.
Okay, request by mayor and council members that items be placed on a future city council agenda. Dr. Kaiser?
Yeah, I'd like to discuss the possibility of moving to action minutes versus the current, verbatim minutes that we're currently doing.
Good idea. We'll put that one on the agenda for 1 week.
Yeah, let's see if we can get it next week. If not, we'll push it back.
Okay, we'll see if we can accomplish that next week.
Next week?
Yeah, if we can.
Okay, anybody else? Councilmember Davis, you're sure. Councilmember Crawford.
To make it formal from the council, the Animal Center discussion on the agenda next week. I know Mr. James already mentioned that, but I'd like that to be a formal item from a council member. So
I believe we've established that next week,
yes,
right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
We had an information thing before about green space, and I didn't see that on our non-discussion packet. Do we have something coming up in the near future regarding green space as part of planning?
Yeah, I had asked for that initially, and I sat down with Mr. James and our city attorney, and I looked at my concerns, and quite frankly, I was satisfied with what they told me. I saw no reason to put it on the agenda.
If we're not going to have it on the agenda, can we just get a note sent out regarding that information? Thank you.
Anybody else? Announcements by mayor and council members. Councilmember Crawford.
Nothing, sir.
Councilmember Kaiser.
Nothing.
Councilmember Edwards.
Nothing, sir.
Councilmember Davis.
I had the pleasure earlier in the week to swing by the library and get a wonderful tour by the staff of the children's library section. They're doing some great things there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they've got planned coming up in the near future.
Excellent. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Just a couple of things. Attended the TML regional meeting. I'd like to say that together as a group, we have a greater impact in our region here. Also attended Alan Cochran's retirement ceremony and want to say thank you for his service.
Councilmember Larson. Yeah, I also attended Rex's retirement. Not a whole lot of people know who Rex is because we all call him Alan out at Schertz Local Government Corporation. Exceptional dedication to us and to Seguin and even to Cibolo. His talents will definitely be missed. Information available in City Council package, monthly update on large projects and the pending information items. One more comment.
One more comment. Mr. Gutierrez, you were over at the TML Region 7 meeting. They talked about the TML president. She came through and she talked about legislative updates and things that were happening. And guys, this is very serious. If you're not looking at the legislative updates on TML, please start looking at it because they're trying to force things on cities and they're trying to basically tell us how to run our cities. We really need, and this is legislation, of course, we really need to go out, no different than unfunded mandates. We need to take a look at that and be versed on it because your constituents will be asking you about that in the future.
Very well. There being no further business, we are adjourned.
It is the total of that, about 9,000.